Sources say the shockingly selfish 4-year-old German Shepherd appears callously unswayed by the constant stream of gloomy market forecasts and continues gorging on brand-name pet foods, milk bones, and table scraps as if the U.S. unemployment rate hasn't been above 8% for the past 3 years.
Here we are tightening our belts while this dog scarfs down bowl after bowl like the Dow Jones Industrial Average has gone through the roof or something. You think that he'd think twice since U.S. credit rating's been downgraded, but Digby doesn't give a damn. Ain't that right, Digby? You don't give a flying do you?
The Onion solemnly bids farewell to the 22 crew members who perished during the production of today's Week in Review. You will be missed. For more, visit theonion.com/newsbeat.
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program. You can join us here. You can bring up absolutely anything you want to discuss. All you have to do is dial in to do that. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you in the studio tonight is Ian.
And Jay Noon.
Jay Noon with us on a different day than normal. You got some other things scheduled for this week. So glad to have you in here tonight when we also have with us from, is it Costa Rica right now?
That's right. I'm in Costa Rica.
Mark Edge is with us from Costa Rica. Are you in the capital city, Mark, or somewhere else?
I am not in the capital city.
Okay. Not going to tell us where, though, huh?
Well, I mean, I don't want the hit squad coming to get me.
All right. Well, we got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, given that it is Independence Day. And starting out with a survey that Americans, not surprisingly, are in a large part clueless about what the point of the 4th of July is. And, of course, we've been pointing this out for years on Free Talk Live, that there's been, for as long as I can remember, seems like a concerted push to relabel the holiday from Independence Day to the 4th of July. The 4th of July, the day on which you purchase and explode firecrackers from China and buy alcohol and, meat for a barbecue, and you throw a big party, and you don't really know why, because it's just the 4th of July. It's a day that people do these things, right?
When I grew up, we used to go to New Hampshire and purchase our fireworks because I was in Massachusetts.
The only place you could.
So we'd have to go buy these fireworks, drive across this imaginary border where there's people that have guns, and then drive and then go buy these fireworks, which was totally fine, okay to do, and then literally turn around and drive a quarter mile, and now you're in violation of Massachusetts law, and go home and blow off fireworks. We did that a lot.
I remember hearing when we first moved here about Massachusetts State Police staking out the fireworks store parking lots in New Hampshire to look for people that had mass plates and then pull them over on the way home. I think they stopped doing that, but that was definitely in the news in the past.
Yeah, there was definitely, and I forget, I think it's Jaffrey, New Hampshire. I think it's Route 202. The fireworks store is, you could throw a baseball into Massachusetts from the parking lot. And I do remember a story about that. There was basically an undercover cop sitting there, and he would radio cars that would just, go south because the only place to go was Massachusetts. Right. And there'd be, and I remember driving through there years ago, and I had gotten hay or something, but I remember they just had like 6 or 7, cruisers kind of, there's like a little like recreational area, and there's like over there, and they had
just lined up to pull people over.
Just pulling people over.
So for a lot of people, they don't even have the freedom to set off fireworks in different places in the United States. Not a particularly independent feeling, but I don't think I've ever seen a poll like this before, where according to the-sun.com, looks like a poll has been done by an organization called One Poll. They spoke with 1,000 U.S. respondents, 99% of whom identified as either a born or naturalized U.S. citizen. And when asked what the 4th of July is meant to officially commemorate, only 59% gave the correct answer, which was the signing of the Declaration of Independence. 41% of them got the question wrong, although 22%.
Was it multiple choice?
I presume so, because they are saying that 22% chose, quote, the establishment of the United States as an independent nation. So it's not as wrong. Those people aren't as wrong as they could be, I suppose, in that case. And only 45% correctly answered the year the very first organized celebration of independence took place, which was 1777, a year after the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. So 41%, 4 out of 10 people in the United States do not know what the point of Independence Day is. They don't even know, probably, that it's called Independence Day.
So to tell you how old these people are in this, I wonder how many of those 41% are, say, like under 25 or you know, or grew up in a city or, you know, something like that, because there's definitely huge cultural conflicts in this country between, you know, the rural and the city areas with all kinds of things, especially things just like, and also with, you know, the ones that, you know, are still in some form of public indoctrination, whether it be public school or university.
I can't get too upset about the people who said that it was the forming of the nation or something like that. I mean, I don't know how this was set up, but if you read that and you're like, oh yeah, that's what the 4th of July is about, I can't call that too up. I can't get too upset.
Well, and it, you know, it makes logical sense. They're not totally off, but you know, the reason I asked the age is because, you know, especially school for the past couple of generations, they've been more concerned about, you know, what gender you might want to be or pretend to be, or your friend is, or whoever, gender, you know, affirmation, than they have about actual history. In fact, I just, an uncle of mine passed away, my Uncle Kevin, this past winter, and this past weekend we had a family meet up and a little ceremony for him. And I was talking to a couple of my grandfather's sisters. So one woman, 79 years old, and the other one, 75 years old. And they were, you know, got to meet my kids for the first time and had a blast with the kids. And they're like, please teach your children cursive. And these guys are, you know, they worked basically in education a good chunk of their lives. You know, these would be my great aunts. And I'm like, oh, I plan to teach them cursive. I want them to be able to read deeds and titles and, you know, script from, you know, 100 years ago, because, and so I said to these guys, I go, why are public schools not teaching cursive anymore? And she says, well, because they say everything's done on a computer. And I said, well, I think it's so that in 50 years, nobody can look back 150 years and, you know, see what history actually said, because all the digital stuff is so easy to just sort of make it whatever you want, to where the stuff that's written in archives, or, you know, you might find a book from the 1800s that grandpa, you know, left you or something. These kids won't be able to read that stuff. And she's like, yep, I agree with you. They just, and then the same thing with all the gender stuff. You know, you didn't have all these problems 30 or 40, 50 years ago. And, you know, the public schools are certainly creating them now. And that came right from two women that, you know, spent a lot of their career in public education.
Unfortunately, Jay, I did take a look here to see if they have demographic information on this, and most surveys you can, you know, dig in and you can actually find the official results, right? Like this was just being reported by whatever website, and I went to OnePoll's site, and I expected I was going to be able to actually get the full breakdowns, which you would normally be able to get from a poll, but I can't find it. So it would be really interesting to see, you know, what are the age demographics? Are younger people less likely to know what Independence Day is than older people? I mean, it seems like something we could safely presume to be the case.
I think younger people are less likely to be able to find the United States on a map.
Yeah,
that too.
Yeah, there was some of that kind of stuff going on with this survey too, according to Study Finds, which is also reporting on the same survey. 4 out of 10 did not know that the right to bear arms is part of the Second Amendment as opposed to the First. I mean, that's trivia, but still, 4 out of 10. And 11% mistakenly believed that the freedom of speech was not part of the First Amendment at all. So 1 in 10 of Americans don't even know that freedom of speech is right there in the First Amendment. Again, 1 in 10, I guess that's not so bad in that particular case. But 4 out of 10 not even knowing what Independence Day is. It's pretty sad stuff.
Well, I think that what I get out of this is when you have 1 in 10 Americans who don't know that the freedom of speech is enshrined in the Bill of Rights, that those people still have the right to vote.
Yeah, they do.
And they probably have.
Mhm.
And I just would like to hear a defense as to, that 10%, because that 10% has a counterparty. That counterparty is the top 10%, the people who really know what they're talking about when it comes to the Constitution and the governance of the United States and things like that. And the bottom 10% block out all the votes that choose to vote, the bottom 10% that choose to vote, because many of them opt out. But those people block out all the people at the top that vote.
And by that, you mean they cancel those votes.
They cancel those votes out. For if you have, if you've got 10 people voting for Joe Blow and you've got 11 people voting for, Winona, whoever, I mean, it's only that last vote counted because the other people blocked it out.
Well, I mean, just to be fair to those people, the people at the upper echelons of education aren't necessarily better at voting. I mean, a lot of those people are voting for big government status as well, so they may or may not cancel. I mean, it's hard to really say. I guess you can say they're uninformed.
I'd rather have people that know what the hell they're talking about vote than people who do not.
I know how to solve that problem.
Abolish voting?
Well,
abolish the government?
I think only landowners should be able to vote.
And
that's
people
the way
with a stake in the game?
Right, and that's the way it was at one time. And if you're a landowner, how's a landowner going to answer this poll? Right?
Yeah.
How's someone that owns land? Because there are a certain type of individual that owns land versus, people that don't own land, in general.
What should there be a minimum amount of land, or can I divvy up my acre into 100 parts and sell 1/100th of an acre to my friends so they can register to vote?
I don't like rules like that. But
because that will happen. Mark's right about that.
But I do know that years ago I had come across some stuff where it was the Indiana Corporation, and every basically landowner had a share in the Indiana Corporation, and this was like from the 1800s. I don't remember exactly what year, and it's also been 20 years since I've researched this stuff. But this was when I was first getting into like alloidal title and land patents and stuff like that. But basically, it's landowners, for example, when you're going to go vote at your local town thing, whether to increase the budget or not, is landowners who are going to have to pay for it. And right. So when you have a whole bunch of people living in the local projects, those, the Section 8 housing, they all show up and vote because they want to make sure they get theirs. All the parasites show up and vote. Actually, not all of them. At least half of them do. But less than 1% of the productive working class actually show up and vote because a lot of times they got to work.
They're too busy.
They got better stuff to do. And the parasite class on election day, town election day, they always have the day off, and it's usually paid, for them, depending on which particular sector of the parasite you're working for. But and that's the way it was. I believe back shortly after the Revolutionary War and stuff, that it was landowners who had who voted because they were the ones that counted. They had.
Was that a constitutional amendment that changed that?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I don't either. It would be interesting to see somebody make a proposal, like a state rep, to put forward a proposal, and I presume that's going to have to be a constitutional amendment to change it back, at least here in New Hampshire, to see if you could get that to even get any kind of traction.
Rick Humboldt actually did a thing years ago in Henniker. It was late. It was when he was into Ron Paul. Big, that's how he got into freedom, was Ron Paul. So this was in the early 2000s. He did put some kind of warrant article in. For the town to vote on, that only landowners that only landowners could vote on particular articles that increased the taxes or increased basically their burden. I don't remember how it was written, and it got some votes, but it wasn't voted in.
Yeah. That's tough because you're going against all the regular people that don't own land, and then they're going to vote it down.
Right.
Yeah, we've got almost 200 years of the whole notion that everybody, one person, one vote. And I mean, that's in the human scale of things, it's a really short period of time, but I mean, there's all kinds of plans. One thing I've said is that we already have a test to see whether somebody's qualified to vote or not, and we call it the United States Citizenship Exam. Now, it's not issued to everybody who gets a vote, but it is issued to the people who are not born within the plot of the polygon known as the United States. And in that manner, we have a test for who gets to vote and who doesn't. So why not administer that test to everybody? What difference does it make what piece of mud you happen to have been pushed out on? And, I would say that might be a solution. But again, I don't think any of these things are particularly likely. And this is one of the reasons why I picked up and left the United States, because all the solutions, all the good ideas put out by all the earnest good people are simply going to be ignored. I mean, when Donald Trump decided he wasn't going to take the time to even think about administering the metric system, and I know that this is a weird thing to harp on, but I'm like, yeah, this guy could get anything he wants to get done, and he's just busy tweeting away, and it's just. It's doomed. It's where the deck chairs are on the Titanic, and we know how that ends up.
Yeah, I think most of us on this show would agree with the assessment that the United States is doomed. As only the question is, how much longer does it have? How many more years? Because, by the way, 250 years is coming up in 2026, if I'm correct about that.
I don't think that this country is 250 years. It is near that. I think basically what the United States of America, the Bill of Rights, the constitutions, all these freedoms, that all came to a sudden halt in 1864 with Executive Order Number 1.
What was that?
Executive Order Number, I believe it was March 31st, 1864 is when, and I could have that date a little wrong, is when Abraham Lincoln called on the militia to come stand guard at Washington, D.C. So this was basically the very beginning of the Civil War. And by the time we got to Clinton, I believe that there was over 10,000 executive orders. And so
there was never one before Abraham Lincoln. He was the first one.
That was number 1.
Wow.
Unless somebody wants to correct me.
That's amazing.
So basically the Constitution was set aside and was no longer in effect because the government was operating under basically martial law. And then in 1867, we had the Reconstruction Acts of 1867, which is basically where our modern form of federal government down sort of control started, best I can tell. And the other thing, too, is, with voting, so I like the idea of, and I used to like this a lot more when I was like more of a, staunch conservative 20 years ago. But if you are a welfare recipient or a government employee, if you
shouldn't be able to vote.
Shouldn't be able to vote.
Seems fair.
But my neighbor should.
You might be able to get that one to pass.
You might be able to.
In the right circumstance.
My neighbor should be able to vote for anything that there is to vote for, however he feels, as long as his vote doesn't impact my rights. I mean, that was really the whole premise, as far as I'm concerned. Like, that's a sum of what the Declaration of Independence, was about. That you do anything you want as long as you don't violate anyone's life, liberty, or property.
To that same end, the government employees should also not be allowed to come and testify to the State House. Because if you ever go to the State House in New Hampshire, it's very accessible. Anybody who wants to can come down there and testify on any bill. Every bill gets a public hearing, so very easy to go down there and be heard. But the problem is most of the people testifying there, besides there are a bunch of free staters and they're doing a great job, but most of the people testifying are government bureaucrats who are down there advocating, police officers, Department of Transportation, you name it. If there's a bill that could possibly expand their power, they're on the spot ready to testify in favor of why they should have more power and they should have a bigger budget and more control. And it's just so hard for the average person to take a day off of work and get up there. You have to really be dedicated to go to that State House. But these government bureaucrats, they get paid to go to the State House.
There was, 2017, I was there a bunch at the State House just watching these bills, and there was a guy, he represents the Chief of Police Association or something, he said.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he was a Laconia Chief of Police or I forget what town, but I talked to him for a minute. And
old white-haired guy.
Yeah. And I said, so you're getting paid to be here today? He he didn't really want to answer me. He's like, yeah, it's part of my salary. And finally was his answer. But speaking of hay, There's a whole bunch of DCYF social workers we've been looking at their, I had a good meetup about a month ago with J.R. Hull, and he's been doing State Representative J.R. Hull, and he's been doing a bunch of research. A whole bunch of these social workers are making like 40, 50 grand a year just in overtime. They're like, yearly paychecks, like over 100 grand a year.
Just to ruin people's lives.
And they're all just miserable, stupid people. It's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, the parasite's really gotten out of control. In fact, when I run for state rep again, one of the things I want to do is promote or be part of my campaign is the government needs an ivermectin treatment, or the state needs to be dewormed.
Deworm them.
Because we got a lot of these like nasty parasites in the state that would serve no purpose in a free economy. But there are a lot of like positions in the state that would actually, exist in a free economy.
Sure, like snowplow guy.
Stuff like that, infrastructure.
Right.
But anyways, the state needs an ivermectin treatment in a bad way.
Are you going to run again next year?
I think so, as long as my wife lets me.
You got to keep up the momentum for sure. If you want to comment here, it is Independence Day. The number is 603-283-6160. Related story from the New York Times about people who aren't feeling particularly patriotic. Headline, no sparklers for these folks. Growing up in Benton, Arkansas, Malaya Tapp loved celebrating the 4th of July with her family. She said, we'd go to parades and see fireworks shows and hang out with friends. It was always such a fun holiday. But now that she's an adult, she's 18 and entering college next year, commemorating the holiday isn't so simple. It started in 2020 when the Black Lives Matter movement spotted many of the injustices across the country. She said, I lost a lot of my patriotic feelings. She now lives in Atlanta, also realized that many festive components of the 4th of July just aren't palatable for her. And regardless of how you feel about the issue that might have brought her out of her patriotism, the fact is, this is true for a lot of people. As the federal or state or local government begins to set its sights on more and more of our friends and family members, or us directly, that is what it's going to take in a lot of cases to shake people out of their slumber and get them to pay attention to what's actually going on. And it will absolutely ruin those people's patriotism when they realize that this isn't the free country they thought it was.
My dad used to always say, people don't care about freedom. They don't care about defending themselves. They don't care about like what goes on in court or any of those things until their ox gets gored. Mm-hmm. And, your ox, 200 years ago, if you weren't able to use your ox to pull your plow or to, get your wagon of goods to market, your family might starve to death and not make it through winter. So, and there was a lot of people that they didn't pay attention to things until something bad happened to them.
Unfortunately, that's what it takes. I mean, you can story after story after story can hit the news, and they can just rationalize it away by saying, "Oh, well, it's just a few bad apples. Most police are good." And it's not until that the cops show up and shoot their dog or throw a grenade in their baby's crib that they actually finally realize that there is a serious problem. And it's not just a few bad apples, or that the rest of the saying is a few bad apples spoils the bunch. Of course, nobody ever says that part. The number here is 603-283-6160, just like how almost no one even calls this holiday Independence Day. So it's important to remember when somebody wishes you happy 4th of July, you can just bat it back at them and say, Happy Independence Day. Just remind them.
That's what I do.
Yeah, exactly. There's more coming up here. The number is 603-283-6160. You can join us on Free Talk Live.
A local man treats his girlfriend to a sumptuous 20-second massage, and an area desk doesn't mind if people sit on it like a chair every once in a while. This is The Onion Week in Review. Following months of anticipation and global fanfare, the royal baby was finally born this week. Sources close to the royal family say the newborn prince spent his first days crawling around Buckingham Palace, eating his first meal, and even speaking his first words. The Onion has obtained this exclusive audio clip. In other news, a man's annual 6-sentence conversation with his cousin goes smoothly, a generous improv troupe performs for free, and a pool owner has a bathing suit that touched his penis you can borrow.
This is the Onion News Network.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. At least 2 mass shootings have rocked the United States as it celebrates Independence Day. Both incidents took place on Monday evening. One in Philadelphia, where a gunman wearing a bulletproof vest opened fire in the southwest of the city, killing 5 people and injuring 2 children. Police chased the 40-year-old suspect into an alley where he surrendered. Separately, in Fort Worth, Texas, 3 people were killed and another 8 injured. A crowd had gathered in a parking lot for a July 4th celebration. Police are continuing to investigate. 7 people have been injured, 3 seriously, after a car ramming and stabbing attack in Tel Aviv, Israel. The attack happened as Israeli forces entered the 2nd day of an ongoing raid in Jenin, in the occupied West Bank, which has drawn condemnation from the United Nations and from Washington. 10 people have died so far, including 3 children. Around 120 people have been injured. Mia Alberti has more.
Residents of the occupied West Bank are accusing Israel of committing war crimes during this raid in Jenin, which has been the largest such incursion since 2002. Residents are living under heavy gunfire and airstrikes. The Palestinian Red Cross estimates that 3,000 people have now been displaced due to the fighting, and many families spent the night at makeshift shelters in schools and mosques, but many others have been actually unable to flee due to the fighting. Those that stayed behind don't have water at the moment. There are also reports of power and internet shortages.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has approved Japan's controversial plan to release treated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima power plant into the ocean. The UN's watchdog chief, Rafael Grossi, met Prime Minister Fumio Kishida after delivering the results of its safety review. Discharge could begin within the next few weeks. FSN's Rebecca Bunden has this from Tokyo.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has said the impact that it believes it would have on fish, on the sea, on the water is actually negligible. What we also heard today from Mr. Grossi, who's the head of the agency, is he is now going to go on to visit the plant in Fukushima. That's his plan for Wednesday. He's on a 4-day visit to Japan at the moment, having met Prime Minister Kishida. And then what he wants really is for the agency to actually have an ongoing presence during this process.
Residents of Sudan's capital, Khartoum, continue to endure the effects of violent fighting over the city between forces loyal to the government and forces loyal to a rebel general. Thousands have been killed since the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces tried to take control of the country on April the 15th. Millions have been displaced. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here and bring up what you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. We're talking a little bit about independence and Independence Day. Last night I said we were going to get into a story about Northern California's secession. We never got to it, so hopefully we'll have a chance to do that here tonight with you. It's Ian.
And Jay.
And Mark.
We also have Mark joining us from somewhere in Costa Rica. Of course, your calls and thoughts are welcome. The number is 603-283-6160. Also discussing 4 out of 10 Americans don't even know what is being celebrated on Independence Day. Of course, the question was, what is being celebrated on the 4th of July? So, and I think that comes from a wide level of propaganda that is out there in the mainstream media and from politicians. I saw Joe Biden on social media today from his account, which is probably not run by him, run by his handlers likely, but Joe Biden's handlers posting a happy 4th of July meme. So at government levels, at press levels, media levels, you constantly see people referring to the holiday as the 4th of July. It's just been programmed into people to wipe away any kind of thoughts of independence. And again, if you want to comment, you can join the show. The number is 603-283-6160. A survey by YouGov according
just to be completely fair here, it's not independence for you on Independence Day. It's independence for the United States government from the British government. Like, that's what the purpose is. I
don't know if there was a United States government at the time the Declaration was
there certainly wasn't. As a matter of fact, it was a bunch of individual states that put out a declaration. They came together and put out a declaration. And by the way, the term "we the people" doesn't come around for another close to 2 decades.
So then that would argue against what you're saying, and that would be that those people were declaring independence together from the king and his government, and that they didn't even have a real government to replace it with at that point.
Well, how's this? Fine. It's the independence of 13 nations from Great Britain.
Okay.
And to further comment on what you had to say about the government, U.S. government has the independence. Actually, the U.S. government just has monopoly on violence. In fact, they are totally dependent on people being dependent on the state. This is why Health and Human Services wants to make sure that there's as many drug addicts as possible in every city. Just ask any EMT who responds to a heroin overdose. If the guy who did the heroin overdose or the opiate overdose, has an EBT card, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, they all do. In fact, I can't recall any of them that don't, because Health and Human Services wants to make sure they keep on, doing their drugs. But yeah, so we have a codependency issue. So the government is very dependent on, a serfdom class, a slave class, consumers and producers, and
they're making more of them all the time.
And they're very dependent on a whole useless class of people who just, sit there and, are in a hunched over position, constantly because they're getting whacked out on, the cheapest high they can find on the street, which today I guess is, fentanyl.
Heroin, fentanyl.
Yeah. And of course, all that stuff is very much government subsidized. It's all brought into the country by the government. It's all distributed
those
by the
videos
government.
of those junkies on city streets are just heartbreaking.
Kensington Street, Philadelphia is like the scariest ones, but even like Venice Beach and
San Francisco.
Yeah, it's
Portland.
just
Seattle. There's so much of it.
And it's a direct result of a government requiring, the government is dependent on that to be out there. So here we can, we need to take care of these people. This is the example, this kind of stuff. And also, but the fact is if the product, if all we got to do to really limit government now, is the easiest in history, is just stop trading in their coin. Stop using their script,
they're not making it easy. I'll tell you that. I mean, they're making it very difficult to get into cryptocurrency. I mean, we were talking with Aaron Day about it over the weekend. The Republican presidential candidate, the only one that actually, is a liberty-minded person. He's a free stater. He wrote a book about it, and it is, it's harder than it's ever been. I mean, they want people to be ready to be taking on their central bank digital currency. They want people to think that the central bank digital currency, or the CBDC, is the same thing as Bitcoin. It's a digital currency. You don't need this Bitcoin stuff. In fact, we're going to make it hard for you to even get Bitcoin, is what they're trying to do.
I wonder how well the drug dealer is going to adopt the CBDC. Because right now you can go down. There's tons of ways in any big city in America where there will be someone who will be willing to sell you, their EBT card. Right. All the groceries on it for 25%, or 50%,
just so they can get some cash for some drugs. Yeah.
Right. So I just the big thing is that the drug dealers are going to have to be able to take this central bank digital currency in order to make that work, because but I'm sure there'll be a way for them to do it.
I mean, they're not going to get rid of cash the next day, so they're going to have cash for some amount of time. But you're right, that will be a real challenge for them if and when they eliminate cash from the economy. Because drugs are still going to get sold. They're still going to figure out a way, but what sort of creative
ways? It's not just they're going to get sold. I mean, this is the Jay's point, and it's pretty valid, is that we know that the United States government has been involved in shipping drugs into the United States.
Sure, the CIA.
How involved, we can't prove.
The military.
But we know that it's true.
Yeah.
Is it 1%? Is it 99%? I don't know. But it makes sense that they built the prison industrial complex to incarcerate their competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I don't know. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We're not there yet. And I don't know how long it's going to be from the implementation of the CBDC to the elimination of cash. That's their plan.
I suspect that the CBDC is really going to just bring a massive hyperinflation within the CBDC itself, because, well, first
that's
off,
the plan. Yeah,
in order
absolutely.
if that's the only way you can pay me for a service, like, for example, that's the only way you're able to pay.
You can't have a CBDC account. You don't have a social security number.
And, well, I mean, I could probably get one if I really wanted to, like, sign up for their system somehow, or maybe get a number or something, which I'm not going to do.
That, yeah.
Right. But, like, you're not going to get my service. But, but I've found ways to have people, use a credit card, for example, to pay me. And they'll pay me 50% more or 100% more, for example, to do something, or a check, because, I got to, like, send it to some third party somehow to, make
it's a
it
hassle.
work.
It's a hassle.
And, actually, it was something I had to do a lot before cryptocurrency became, I couldn't buy anything I never bought anything basically online or on Amazon until Purse.io came out.
Oh,
the first
rest
time.
in peace, Purse.io. The news just came out within the last 24 to 48 hours that it almost died a few years ago, and then somebody rescued it, and now it's apparently been bought by some other company, and that other company they're shutting it down.
Okay. Yeah,
so it's over. Apparently, though, there is a competitor, and our co-host Chris Wade mentioned what it was the other day. I'll see if I can pull up the URL. Obviously, I haven't tried it because I'm not allowed to use crypto, but for those that did love Purse, Chris Wade, our co-host on Friday nights from Freedom Decrypted, recommends BitOff, like BITOFF, like you bit off more you can chew, bitoff.io, which apparently allows you to buy from more than just Amazon. Apparently you can do different websites, like I think Walmart maybe, or eBay or something like that.
And Walmart's actually
using
crypto. A lot of people, I'm not a big fan of like any of these big corporations, but like Walmart, a lot of people are saying is better than Amazon, and it's basically like the same Amazon experience when you go on
the website,
I guess, to buy it and they ship it to you. But I haven't used it yet, but that's nice to know we can, access some Walmart through crypto that way. And
like I said, I haven't tried it. Don't know if it's great. Don't know if it's really crappy, but I've heard that there are discounts available. So that was the old reason why people used Purse, was because you could not only spend crypto, but you could also save 5, 10, 15, 20%, sometimes more.
What I really liked about Purse is that most of the people who were buying the item on Purse were these guys like in Indonesia who were working for Amazon and getting paid in some kind of Amazon credit.
Turning that into crypto.
So they were turning that into crypto. So I really like the fact that, these poor people, who are working are exposed to it. They're exercising it. They're using it because it's just going to make them more resilient in the future.
Well, and that goes to the point that Americans aren't willing to, and I think it's true for people in general, they're not willing to change until they're forced to in a lot of cases. And when it comes to money, the force is coming when it comes to the CBDC. They are going to start shoving that down people's throats as much as they can when it finally gets approved. It hasn't been approved yet. It isn't a done deal. It could somehow not happen, I suppose, at this point. But Aaron Day thinks it's coming within the next 12 months.
I think it's well. Go ahead, Mark.
I'd like to pop in on this one. Let's remember what happens when the government tries to innovate in the areas of currency. Does anyone remember the presidential dollars?
No.
These coins, they look like the kinds that you'd get in your Easter basket of little gold coins. They're golden, and they were a bit larger than a quarter, and they had each of the presidents on them.
When did these come out?
Probably 10 years ago.
I remember them.
Yeah, and they're not even that old. Now, these were put out by the Federal Reserve because dollars, you'll note.
I remember the one with the Sacagawea on it. That was also kind of golden or whatever.
I got a little interesting factoid about that one, but let me get back to that. Right. The dollar wasn't. Notice that the $1 bill is not shaped or not printed like the rest of the bills.
What do you mean?
So the $5 has Abraham Lincoln's head real big, right? It used to be small, but it's real big.
Yeah, they never redesigned the one. You're right.
It all started with the 100 and worked its way down to the 5.
That's true.
But they don't do that with the 1 because the 1 isn't going to get a redesign. It is garbage. Well, think about what $1. $1 would buy you 2 candy bars when you were a kid.
Yeah, not anymore, right?
Right.
Yeah,
$1 won't buy you 1 candy bar now.
Right. Yeah. The 2 is the new 1.
Well,
The 5
right,
is a
and
new one.
Yeah,
you used
pretty
to
much.
carry $2 bills around.
I still do.
And give them as tips.
I still
Well, now
do.
you give 2 as tips.
Yes,
Because
yeah.
the currency is devalued so much. Well,
Big time.
it makes perfectly good sense that Americans should adopt a $1 coin, because a coin will last much longer than a bill, but they won't do it because they don't have to do it. And so the two
Sure.
things that you pointed out, that there will be pressure. Well, there's pressure to adopt these $1 presidential coins, but nobody's doing it.
I don't remember any pressure at all. I don't even remember the coins.
Well, I think that there'll be about the same amount of pressure with the CBDC, because the government's really bad at soft
no,
pressure.
dude, no. They're gonna require everybody to. I mean, if they don't do this, they're fools. They're gonna require everybody on welfare to switch over to the CBDC.
Absolutely.
And they're gonna require anybody to get a tax return.
So I think this is going to be fantastic.
Well, they should pull all $1 bills out of circulation.
No, they're going to do the
You know what I mean?
reverse. They're going to pull the hundreds out of circulation. They're going to pull the 50s out of circulation.
They've already pulled the $1,000 bills
And
out,
the 500s.
$500
Long
bills.
ago, yeah.
Yeah, long time ago.
Long ago.
So the reason I say I think this is going to be fantastic, if we look at the introduction of the CBDC, like they pushed the COVID-19 vaccine on everybody. Now, I'm not picking on anyone, but anyone who did not take the COVID-19 vaccine does not regret not taking the COVID-19 vaccine.
That's pretty much true, yes.
Yeah,
and a lot of people who did take it regret it.
Yes.
Yeah. Some of them are dead at this point.
Yep. So anyways, and there's good if you took the COVID-19 vaccine, there's some protocols you can find out there. Naturalnews.com or not, maybe that's what it is. Health Ranger Mike Adams, he's has some pretty good write-ups on how to like get that stuff out of your body, how to heal yourself, things you can do.
Some 30-year-old bodybuilder just died.
Yeah, I saw that.
After he had gotten like 4 of these vaccines, he ended up regretting it. Apparently, I saw an interview with him where he was talking about how he had his blood he tried to have his blood cleaned, where they siphoned the blood out of his body and put it through some kind of process. Didn't save him.
Yep.
He's gone.
So anyway, and then like the sperm samples of men who have gotten a vaccine, there's like no living sperm, no actual sperm. It's all like spike proteins.
Oh, and by the way, the 30-year-old bodybuilder, he said that when they were pulling his blood, they were looking at it and they saw those little white things that you've seen in what's the video that they came out with? Died Suddenly, I think was the name of it, the documentary, where they're showing all these crazy things that people are pulling out of their veins that are like blocking their heart and blocking their blood flow. He saw those before he died.
So anyways, just like, now, and it's going to get a little more, relevant here in the near future. Everybody's kind of understanding that there was this massive push to do this vaccine. So people are understanding that these vaccines are not safety tested. In fact, there is not a single double-blind placebo test done on any vaccine that is on the child vaccine recommendation, which they scare the hell out of moms with threatening them with social services and DCYF if they don't, vaccinate their kids at the hospital. And, sudden death, infant death syndrome didn't really come about until these, they started pushing all these vaccines. But getting back to the CBDCs, so what I'm hopeful for, these CBDCs are going to come out. Then they're going to say, all right, all welfare recipients, all EBT card, now you have to use CBDC. And then what's going to happen is
because they're going to get all the corporations on board too.
Well, so here's what's going to happen. I think we're going to say this is going to bring on in America what we saw in Venezuela a decade ago, come about with all the food shortages. Because what is really going to come down to is if they're going to force the farmers to accept CBDCs, because the grocery stores and the retailers are going to accept these CBDCs, and then the warehouses are going to accept them, and then the farmers.
But the grocery stores and the warehouses the grocery stores have to accept food stamps currently,
right?
And they're not making farmers accept food stamps, right?
But so they're accepting food stamps, and they're trading back, and those food stamps are represented in USD and dollars. So.
That's what's getting settled into their bank account.
But here's what's really I think is going to happen. Now I'm not what I'm saying is a little speculation about like going back to the farmers. So like these farmers aren't going to accept CBDCs. Well, all the farmers that are selling stuff to Walmart are government subsidized anyways. So what is going to happen is what they can do with the CBDCs really easy is they can hyperinflate the crap out of them.
Sure.
and so what's going to happen is because the price of food is going to skyrocket as soon as you start giving everyone on welfare these CBDCs to do the food. And what's going to happen is so I'm a food producer. You're not paying me that. I'm not taking that evil script. And I don't even want to take dollars from anybody. I take a minimal amount of dollars. And so what I believe is going to happen is the CBDC is going to hyperinflate, and then the dollar will be sort of running alongside of it. All these fiats are going to hyperinflate, and it's going to sort of hopefully collapse this legacy system. And the people who will be able to ride out this collapse are the ones that are, have experience trading outside of, the fiat, for example, using cryptocurrency, using gold back, using silver, or just using barter whatever you do, whatever you produce, whatever your skill is. That I think we're going to see a lot of that coming back. And this is another reason I'm so glad I'm on this land we call New Hampshire, because there are so many people that I just trade with here, and we trade outside the dollar, and it's a very, very normal thing. In fact, sometimes, like at PorkFest, for example, if you're like, oh, I want to pay in dollars, people kind of sort of give you a dirty look. They want that gold back, or that, Bitcoin Cash, or Monero. Monero is a hot one. That's the one a lot of people are like, oh, pay me in Monero. I
one time at PorkFest bought a blowgun from a 10-year-old with Monero.
Nice.
That's pretty sweet.
So, but getting back to these currency, I think as I had said earlier, the easiest way to essentially deal with a bad government is right now in history, because 200 years ago, it would have been very hard to just ignore, the currency, of the world currency, which would be the English pound, I guess, right? 250 years ago.
Yeah.
Today we have that technology. We can just pretty much almost ignore the dollar.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe except for paying property taxes. But if the dollar starts getting ignored on a massive level within the United States, which is the last place it's basically being ignored. So with all of these countries joining the BRICS, actually, one other thing I was thinking too, can New Hampshire just join the BRICS?
I don't think yet.
Can we do it? Can we just trade directly our gold backs with Vladimir Putin for cheap oil? That's what I want to do.
You're getting ahead of yourself,
right,
Jay.
Right.
We got a little ways to go on that one.
But anyways, if the next revolution, I believe, is going to be a financial revolution. And
they're pulling out all the stops to put that thing down. They want to kill cryptocurrency in the cradle, and I think they're a little too late on that, but they're making it as hard as possible. Aaron Day, in his book The Final Countdown, does do a really good job of introducing people to these ideas, talking about the CBDC, talking about the the UN and the IMF and the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, all these big international, big government, world government organizations that are pushing countries towards the CBDC and giving people literally step-by-step instructions on how to protect themselves financially by getting into cryptocurrency, getting into self-custody, precious metals. And I got to say, I really thought it was a great book. I read the whole thing. So if you are hearing us talking about
and you don't read many books.
I don't, and you're wondering what can I do about this? You see the dark clouds on the horizon. You're wondering what do I do? You can do this stuff, and he makes it as simple as 15 minutes. I mean, you can just get cracking on this, and within a matter of an hour, you've got a little bit more financial independence.
And the greatest way as anyone in the world can exercise dependence, I believe, is exercising trade outside of fiat, trade outside of the dollar of whoever the crown is around you. So in the U.S., trade outside that U.S. dollar. Stop writing checks. Stop swiping cards. Stop using Venmo. Stop using, all these, dollar-based apps, especially these digital ones. Because another thing too is a friend of mine comes to buy some, meat off me one day, and she's like, "Can I pay you in Venmo?" I'm like, no. Well, why are you doing that? You don't have $100 worth of meat. You don't have $100. You don't keep $100 in your. I got it in bank account. Can I write you a check? I'm like, no. Nope. And I'm like, have you not been paying attention to what I'm about and what I'm doing? And she's like, oh, not really. So kind of and she's good. She's a really great mom. She can stack hay. Her kids are awesome. She's just, but she's learning. It's a learning curve for everyone. So, she.
And I think that's important, is to understand that we were all there at one point, and that it's easy to get frustrated with people when they aren't where we are in whatever the area is that it's important to us. But everybody just needs education, and people learn best from somebody with a good attitude.
Yeah, that's true. And it is important to be able to say no and turn somebody down. I know Chris Wade was doing this at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, where he would come up to a vendor. He's hungry, he wants to get some lunch, and like, hey, I'd like to get your tacos. Do you take goldbacks or cryptocurrency? And they might say no, cash only. He would say, I'm sorry, and then turn around and walk away.
He was one of the guys that sort of complained in passing to me about not cooking at PorcFest.
Well,
this
you
year.
are a really good cook. So.
And his was like, oh, I miss your tacos, and he's like, and you'll take goldbacks and cryptocurrency, and I don't even have to ask you. I just scan your QR code you got displayed right there.
There was a taco place that was taking goldbacks.
Oh, that's good. Well, he might not have found it, but he just made that comment to me, so.
But there was a taco place that was only doing cash, and that was like, come on, where do you guys know where you are? But yeah, being kind to people is certainly good, but also being willing to put your foot down in a kind manner is also important, where you can say no and turn away from a deal. And that kind of thing is what motivates people. Like this lady you're talking about, you're telling her, no, I'm not going to take a check. No, I'm not going to take Venmo. Well, she knows you're good at what you do. She knows that you're, whatever it was, whether it's hay or you're working on some sort of construction project or whatever, she knows you're good at it. And she's then going to be motivated to figure out how to get you paid, because to her, it's worth whatever that extra hoop jumping is, whether it's going and buying some gold backs or acquiring some cryptocurrency. She might be more likely to do it.
Yeah, so I gave her the meat. I said, well, I'll see you later. Just pay me next time I see you. And I was going to take some dollars. I got to spend dollars, pay taxes and buy fuel and stuff like that. But 2 days later, she said, I set up a Bitcoin wallet and I bought some Bitcoin.
Wow, nice.
And I sent her an address, and she sent me money.
Yep, perfect. If you want to join the show here, you can. The number is 603-283-6160. So, we don't know how far away the CBDC is. There's certainly other countries that are implementing them and have implemented them. A lot of them are talking about it, and the United States has done at least 3 different tests of different CBDC plans and systems. So, the gears are turning on this. The only thing they haven't done is actually press the go button on this thing.
How many more guns are they going to need to point at people all over the world to make this thing work? It's going to be expensive to make it work, I think.
There's more coming up here. The number is 603-283-6160. Whether you want to comment on Independence Day or whatever is on your mind. Secession talks happening in a Northern California county. We'll talk about that as well. You can join the show. The number is 603-283-6160 here on Free Talk Live. Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here. And I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. That's Bitcoin.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? you can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. At least 2 mass shootings have rocked the United States as it celebrates Independence Day. Both incidents took place on Monday evening. One in Philadelphia, where a gunman wearing a bulletproof vest opened fire in the southwest of the city, killing 5 people and injuring 2 children. Police chased the 40-year-old suspect into an alley where he surrendered. Separately, in Fort Worth, Texas, 3 people were killed and another 8 injured. A crowd had gathered in a parking lot for a July 4th celebration. Police are continuing to investigate. 7 people have been injured, 3 seriously, after a car ramming and stabbing attack in Tel Aviv, Israel. The attack happened as Israeli forces entered the second day of an ongoing raid in Jenin, in the occupied West Bank, which has drawn condemnation from the United Nations and from Washington. 10 people have died so far, including 3 children. Around 120 people have been injured. Mia Alberti has more.
Residents of the occupied West Bank are accusing Israel of committing war crimes during this raid in Jenin, which has been the largest such incursion since 2002. Residents are living under heavy gunfire and airstrikes. The Palestinian Red Cross estimates that 3,000 people have now been displaced due to the fighting, and many families spent the night at makeshift shelters in schools and mosques, but many others have been actually unable to flee due to the fighting. Those that stayed behind don't have water at the moment. There are also reports of power and internet shortages.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has approved Japan's controversial plan to release treated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima power plant into the ocean. The UN's watchdog chief, Rafael Grossi, met Prime Minister Fumio Kishida after delivering the results of its safety review. Discharge could begin within the next few weeks. FSN's Rebecca Bunden has this from Tokyo.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has said the impact that it believes it would have on fish, on the sea, on the water is actually negligible. What we also heard today from Mr. Grossi, who's the head of the agency, is he is now going to go on to visit the plant in Fukushima. That's his plan for Wednesday. He's on a 4-day visit to Japan at the moment, having met Prime Minister Kishida. And then what he wants really is for the agency to actually have an ongoing presence during this process.
Residents of Sudan's capital, Khartoum, continue to endure the effects of violent fighting over the city between forces loyal to the government and forces loyal to a rebel general. Thousands have been killed since the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces tried to take control of the country on April the 15th. Millions have been displaced. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. The British government has moved quickly to quash efforts by local political leaders in Orkney, an island archipelago off the northeastern coast of Scotland, to break away and join Norway. It's an astonishing proposal and reflects deep disquiet among some in Orkney about the way in which they've been treated by the governments in both London and Edinburgh. The council in the remote chain of islands is debating whether to explore alternative models of governance that might open up fresh economic opportunities, with some members favouring a return to Norway, the country that controlled Orkney until the year 1472.
My mother always used to say that it was quicker to get to Bergen than it was to get to Edinburgh, and the shopping was cheaper there.
Former editor of The Scotsman, Magnus Linklater, who was born in Orkney.
The majority of members of the Scottish Parliament live in Edinburgh, Glasgow, or in between, and they tend to focus on their own concerns. It's been, I think, one of the disappointing aspects of devolution. We all thought that once power came up to Edinburgh, places like the Highlands and Orkney and the Western Isles would receive greater attention it hasn't quite worked out that way, and Orkney feels that quite strongly.
But UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's spokesman says there is no mechanism for Orkney to depart the UK and said, "We are stronger as one United Kingdom." With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, 7 people have been injured, 3 seriously, after a car ramming and stabbing attack in Tel Aviv. A gunman in the US city of Philadelphia has killed 5 people and injured 2 children. 3 people have been shot dead in a separate incident in Fort Worth, Texas. And Japan has been approved to release treated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima power plant back into the ocean. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
I'm Brooke Alvarez, and while I may not acknowledge your presence in person, and if you try to approach me, you'll most certainly be hit in the face with the stinging nettles I carry on me at all times, I like to take a moment every now and again to answer your questions so that you can get to know the real me. Here's a tweet from @Kirkamunga saying, "What is the most important thing to remember when talking to people who may not be as informed as you?" I love this question, Kirkamunga. There are 3 simple steps to dealing with uninformed people. First, when you realize that someone doesn't know something, repeat very loudly in their face the thing they don't know. For example, "You don't know who the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe is?" Second, look to everyone around you and let them know that this person is completely ignorant. "Hey everyone, Sebastian doesn't know who the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe is." Third, you call up the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe and tell him that Sebastian doesn't know who he is, and then laugh really loudly until the ignorant person just leaves in utter shame. If you'd like to ask me a question, just tweet it to my handle @BrookeAlvarez or post it to my Facebook wall.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and happy Independence Day to you, at least as independent as you can be under this oppressive state that we need to get rid of at some point. And I don't mean violence. Violence isn't the solution. I want to see peaceful independence. I want to see peaceful secession. Hopefully that can happen before it all comes crashing down, because at some point it will likely fail. No government has lasted forever. No central bank and its currency has lasted forever.
No fiat currency. The U.S. dollar is essentially, like almost 50 years, a little over 50 years old. It was basically the dollar we're using now is, created in 1971.
You're talking about when they got rid of the gold standard or whatever, right? So we can come back and talk more about that. It's Ian, Jay, and Mark here with you tonight. Let's go to the phones and to your calls and thoughts, though. We have Skeeter on the line in California. Go ahead, Skeeter.
Quick point. I think you guys agree. Government, keep hearing you say government is a monopoly on violence. It's not a monopoly on violence. It's or aggression, really. It's a monopoly on justice is a better way to put it. And it isn't a monopoly per se, right? And I had another point.
Why would it not be a monopoly per se?
Yeah, who else
cartel.
can administer justice?
No, it's not a cartel either. It does impose regulations where it raises barrier entry on some of the industries it enters, like education, for instance. But it's not the only provider. You have public roads, public schools, private roads, private schools, etc. So it's not a monopoly per se.
But why is it not a monopoly on violence?
You do have to pay for those schools that you don't have to send your kid to.
Sorry, Mark, go ahead. I got to get in listening mode. I was like trying to.
He said you have to pay for the schools whether you send your kids to them or not.
Yeah, but it still doesn't remove the private schools, which are competition, which would technically not make it a monopoly. They still have to compete in the private versus the private sector in education. Similar with other things they provide.
Okay, but your original claim was that it's not a monopoly on violence per se. So, can you explain that?
No, I said it's a better way to put it is it's unfair just to say it's kind of like an over cynically way to put it.
Well, that's what Barack Obama said. We're just quoting him.
I don't care. I don't care what he says.
I mean, he's telling the truth.
But
you haven't actually given me any reason why it's not a monopoly on violence. I'm still waiting for that.
No, I said I clarified. I said a better way to put it is it's a monopoly on justice, which is a better characterization of the monopoly service it provides, right?
No,
it does.
no,
Protect,
it
some
forces you
We
to.
probably shouldn't use the term justice to describe something that's not justice. Maybe we should use the term arbitration.
That's subjective because, again, we disagree on what justice is.
Well, there is private arbitration out there, Mark. You can go through, a lot of.
Well, I would
contracts.
argue that justice is in fact a thing. That justice is a decision made by an arbitrator, and that something that is not justice, right? Like, you can call yourself the Department of Justice, but justice is only one decision made between two parties, and we probably fall short in that in most cases, but the closer you get, the closer you are to justice. In the same way that truth is truth, justice is justice.
Well, obviously anyone out there can do violence, so they don't actually have a monopoly on violence. I guess you could say that, in that anyone out there can hurt.
They decide which
else.
violence is acceptable and which is not, and that's what a monopoly does. A monopoly says, look, you're over there selling drugs. We're going to send the cops to go get you. I mean, Big Pharma doesn't have a monopoly on drug sales. It just doesn't go to prison when it does.
Yeah, that's I think the important point is what they have is the ability to commit aggressive violence against other people and get away with it, and have most people just say, that's fine. That's what they're there for. That's what they're supposed to do.
And it's called qualified immunity.
Why they do that. There's some admirable reasons. I'm not saying everything they provide is admirable. Okay. But and also,
well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're doing something good with their violently attained booty. They get wealth through the violence that they threaten against people, and if they actually do something helpful to someone with that, it still means that the means to that end were inappropriate. Now, we know that from your previous call, Skeeter, you've described yourself as a utilitarian. So obviously, as a utilitarian, you don't really care if somebody uses violence as long as it goes to an end that you support, right?
As long as there's no other better alternative, yeah. But if you present two alternatives,
so you're basically a monster. I mean, you're basically somebody who is a complete antisocial psychopath who is willing to use violence against people.
I think you're
achieve
the
your
same.
ends. Huh?
So until we,
I'm not willing to use violence
that,
against people, peaceful people. I'm not willing to aggress against my neighbors.
Your definition of monster is subjective.
Absolutely it is. Thanks for the call. The number here is 603-283-6160. We go to Ricky in Pennsylvania. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Ian, I had to follow Skeeter. Nonetheless, today is Independence Day. And, one point I will make before I go into my two parallel stories. Yes, two men did die today. One man I'm briefly going to mention, yes, John Adams, but he was a Federalist. So I'm not going to say much about him, but also Thomas Jefferson. Now, him I'm going to say plenty of tonight. Now, I am a Jeffersonian since I was little growing up, and it's been a big influence on me at any given time. Now, here's the first story, and there's some really interesting parallels between the two of these. Jefferson was a man that was obsessed with written and unwritten constitutionality. Plus, he also did embrace the no-harm theory, now known as the non-aggression principles. Now, here's the story. It was an ongoing problem when he was president with the Tripoli pirates. Now, what happened is the Tripoli pirates grabbed a bunch of our men. They were holding them for ransom, and Jefferson sat out the Navy, hit the Tripoli pirates hard, and got back our men. Now, what happened is, right afterwards, a media man of the time went to Jefferson. So, Mr. President, how did you arrive at your decision to do this? He said, well, when carefully evaluating the situation and my options, I realized there was only two. First option, I disregarded because there was no guarantee. The second option is the one, obviously, that I chose. Now, what happened is the man said, well, Mr. President, I'm glad you got the men back, but it seems like things don't change. He says, did you not commit an unconstitutional act? And here's what Jefferson said. He said back to me, he said, yes, I did, but I've learned there are exceptions to constitutionality. Now, here's the parallel story 200 years later. This one, some of the details, maybe you guys can help me with because it's from memory. Since you mentioned it, under Barack Obama, there was a situation. This lasted the better part of a week. And I forget who it was, but somebody was holding men and women of ours for ransom, military ransom. Now, it started out right away. The media is all over this because of modern times. And so the American people cross country were involved in this. And right away, they wanted the ransom. And Barack said, I think that would be a poor idea because people are cross country saying, pay it, get back our money. And I think that'd be a poor idea. Towards the end of the week, he made a comment. I believe he said, I'm the president. It's my decision, my responsibility. Once again, there's more pressure. By the end of the week, he had clearance, I guess, from Congress, and he paid these people.
Wow, they paid terrorists? That's
yes, and even here's
supposed
what
to do
happened.
that.
Unfortunately, he listened to the American people. Now, Barack knew better because he's big into Jefferson. He knew this story. So he paid them anyways and listened to the American people. I mean, it was loud with cross country all week. They were on him. He paid them. They immediately killed him. Now, there's some really interesting parallels here. And this is, I think, interesting up for discussion, you know?
I have no clue what this situation was that you're referring to. So I know that there was that one reporter that we reported on for a long time who probably just ended up dead at some point. But
you talking about the ISIS guy?
No, it had nothing to do with that. Mm-hmm. This is why I don't have the internet. But I do distinctly remember this situation. And I wish I could remember who it was that holds the ransom. But the thing is, my point is, there is exception to constitutionality.
Who would it be besides ISIS?
Huh?
I mean, who's holding U.S. military assets for ransom besides a Muslim extremist group?
It was definitely a terrorist organization. But
terrorist doesn't mean Muslim, but okay.
It was somebody that was a terrorist, obviously, for what they're doing. But my observation
probably wasn't
the
IRA.
CIA
well, the thing here that I find the most interesting, Mark, is that for a week, the American people spoke loudly on this. Now, he listened to them, but they were wrong. I think that's a really interesting point. Now, you know, I believe people
There
can
was,
govern
according
themselves.
to just a quick search here, in 2016, there was a report from the Jacksonville, Florida Times-Union, or rather the Associated Press, that the Obama administration made a $400 million cash payment to Iran 7 months prior that was contingent upon the release of a group of American prisoners. Perhaps that was, the issue.
I think that was money that was seized from Iran originally, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's not it. I got to find the story, but it is a true story.
It was apparently originally Iranian money.
But the interesting point I'm looking at is this went on for a week, I promise you. I remember the media coverage. But the American people made this poor choice. They didn't know this story about Jefferson. I mean, Barack did, but they didn't. You know, I think that says a lot. And I think it says a lot of where people's heads are at. You know, the American people were wrong. You know, I hate to admit it. And men and women died as a result.
Well, I guess my question would be is what makes you think that the crowd would be right?
Well, I mean, of course, I think this is a bearing on now because people today don't look at history. They don't look at the past.
People today are the same as people have always been. They're just a little better informed than they were before. I mean, I think about the jury in Ian's case. This is, to me, a really great example of why in the world the idea that somehow the wisdom of crowds is going to make a great decision. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, there really isn't much wisdom.
Democracy sucks. It sucks at large scale. It sucks at small scale.
Apparently, by the way, Ricky, they sent, according to Fortune magazine in a subsequent article that came out in November of 2016, after paying the $400 million to Iran after 4 hostages were apparently released, the U.S. sent another $1.3 billion to Iran after that. So whether or not that was the original story you were referring to, it is pretty outrageous. Thanks for the call tonight. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. Of course, you can bring up anything you want we were talking about people who don't really want to celebrate Independence Day. They're getting kind of burned on the idea that patriotism is some sort of rational thing to be involved with. A survey by YouGov, according to the New York Times, found that 56% of American adults plan to join in the Independence Day festivities this year. So, it's just barely a majority of Americans that are participating in celebrating Independence Day. They give some more examples of some left-leaning people like Marissa Vivori, a 29-year-old tech product manager in Manhattan, remembers the last time she celebrated the 4th of July a few summers ago. She was going to the Hamptons, she said, on the most packed Long Island Railroad train she'd ever been on. She said, I didn't get a seat, and I was standing in the aisle. The toilet overflowed, and we all had to hold our bags. She says she never realized she never loved the holiday. She said, I remember even as a kid feeling bad for the animals during the fireworks. Logistically, celebrating in New York City poses challenges. She says you're either in Manhattan and it's super hot and you're figuring out where you want to watch the fireworks, or you're trying to leave to go to the Jersey Shore or the Hamptons and it's a fortune and overcrowded. She also has political qualms now with the holidays, saying that last summer Roe versus Wade was overturned, and that really made me less inclined to celebrate.
Animals and fireworks. So one of my friends, all of his cows got out the other day because they blew off some fireworks.
Oh, whoa.
And I'm like, you need to blow off fireworks a lot more so your cows are used to it. Not just do it when it's dark all of a sudden and some fireworks go off.
And they knock a fence over
and
they
just ran through a fence or running around. He was able to get them all rounded up by the next morning. But anyways, so I got the gun range in my place, and we have a gun church event, once a month. We haven't been doing it much lately because we've been too busy. But my guns are used to bang. My cows are used to bang. So when my neighbors were, I don't know. I think somebody was doing some big fireworks next to me last night and the night before, and my cows just picked up their heads and looked in that direction.
No biggie.
And they just went back to eating hay.
They're not shooting at us. We're fine.
Yep. And one more thing I wanted to say.
If you can hear the shot, you lived.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say, Mark, you had mentioned something a few minutes ago about the voters haven't changed, or the people haven't changed since then. I kind of think our culture has changed a real lot. I believe today people very much lack wisdom that they had 200 years ago. And they also lack confidence. So 200 years ago, for example, every 12-year-old needed to know how to fit a harness correctly to a horse or to an ox. They knew how to check the lubrication on the wheel bearings and check the tension of the wheel bearings or the end play on their wagon.
Now they know how to boot up the Nintendo Switch. That's about it.
75, 80 years ago, every young man and woman, and this is what I had a conversation with my 70-year-old aunt this weekend. My aunt says, "Oh, sure. When I was 17 years old, I had a car." She goes, "You know, I knew how to change a tire, and I knew how to replace the points." She goes, "I would take a fingernail file and have to clean the points once in a while." She knew how to remove the spark plugs from her car and clean them and put them back in because cars needed lots of maintenance. They weren't super reliable. And even all the things that we're teaching at my place, all the kids, with planting seeds and picking weeds and hauling those weeds to the cows and feeding the cows and, collecting the chicken eggs and feeding the chickens and just cleaning the chicken coop. None of those skills are necessary today to, to basically live a normal life, because you can just take what you if you're an accountant, you just use that, accounting skill that you have, the number crunching skill, or you're some kind of pencil pusher, you go to work in your cubicle or you Zoom to work. I mean, it's getting to the point where you don't even really need a car anymore. Even in rural America, everything can be delivered to you and you don't even need to go to work. But it's gotten to the point today where a lot of people, especially the radical leftists, very much lack wisdom, because you don't have to have any wisdom to survive and have a good life right here now in America. All you need to do is go to college, listen to the guidance counselors, and they will.
You just live on welfare like Sarah.
They can. You can go get your parasite job. That you went to college for, and as long as you're working for the government, your college loans will either be deferred or they'll be maybe even paid for. A lot of people a lot of people go into the military just so they can get their college debt taken care of, or at least deferred, so they don't have to pay for it. I know so many people have done that. But yeah, there's definitely a big lack of wisdom in people who didn't learn like how to work as a young kid, I believe, and like haven't had to actually work for themselves. Like one of the guys I really want to debate next time around I run for state rep is Tony Kaplan.
Who is that?
He's a state representative for Henniker, New Hampshire.
The current state.
Guy, yep. And Democrat. You know, he basically career parasite. You know, he worked in, school systems, pretty much his entire life. But the guy just like very much lacks wisdom, as all do these leftists. And it's very clear to me the wisdom is just not there, or they're lying. It's one or the other. So we'll give him a benefit of doubt and just say, well, he's kind of ignorant. He lacks wisdom. But and they just have a bunch of followers, a bunch of cult members, best I can tell. Like he, even, not even a year ago, he's all like, oh yeah, this vaccine thing, has to happen. Everybody needs to be mandated to be vaccinated. And, he's, still on that. And he voted for like, all these like horrible things that, basically only someone incompetent or who lacks wisdom or is evil, would support. And so we have a lot of that going on now. We have a lot of people who have gray hair and they don't really have any skills. They've never really done any actual real work. Like, if they if they had to hack it, 100 years ago, they wouldn't have made it.
Yeah. If you want to comment here, the number is 603-283-6160. They give a few more examples of people like Connor Miskowick, a 28-year-old content creator in Phoenix. He decided to do a video series in which he asked strangers if they were going to be celebrating Independence Day. He said, I got everything from America's the greatest country in the world, we have to celebrate the American dream, all the way to this country has a lot to work on and America isn't so free and I don't feel like celebrating. He said, I honestly didn't expect to get the variety of answers that I got. He says, I wonder
if they're going to work.
The people answering the question, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to be celebrating, I'm just kind of wondering, like if you got your 9-to-5 job and you've decided, well, I'm not going to celebrate. Yeah. Aren't you kind of celebrating by not going to work?
I don't know. I mean, do a lot of jobs not happen today? Are a lot of people taking time off? I mean, I would think retail.
Almost every job will let you work for 8 hours for free.
There is so locally I went to a hardware store this morning. I needed to get a spring. They're closed. I've kind of thought the hardware store would be like it's like a big deal 4th of July where, getting things sold, I don't know. They were open last year on the 4th of July, but also like, well, I think another thing we're going to start seeing, especially like here in New Hampshire, is we're going to start seeing a lot of these places, especially the small mom and pop shops. I think we're going to see a lot of them not even open on the weekends. Pretty soon, because it's just getting so hard for these guys to find staff. I know there's a local auto parts store I deal with, and they were like, yeah, the manager doesn't want to work on Saturday or Sunday anymore. We only got one manager, so we're probably going to close the store. Well, I mean, that guy wants to hang out with his kids. He wants to do stuff, and he's in a position where he's like, hey, you're gonna have to close the store Saturday, or you're gonna have to fire me and find someone else. And well, they can't do that.
Right?
Like this guy's been there for 20 years, and he like knows everything.
He sets the rules,
and he just has that kind of pull.
Yeah.
In fact, I hope I influenced him, because I was like, he was complaining about having to work so many hours. I'm like, what are they gonna do? Fire you? They'll never replace you. And he's like, you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to comment here, 603-283-6160. Let's bring Sarah in. She's in New Mexico. Speaking of someone living on welfare, here she is. Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, yeah.
Are you celebrating today? Are you celebrating Independence Day?
Well, I hate 4th of July.
Really?
All the so-called legal fireworks, it always turns into illegal fireworks.
Oh, okay. I want to hear more about it here. Hang on, Sarah. We're going to bring you back for that discussion. She doesn't like it when people violate the fireworks laws, whatever they are, there in New Mexico, where she's calling from. 603-283-6160. You can join the show, and you can bring up whatever you want to discuss here on Free Talk Live. We got more coming up.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market. Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. At least 2 mass shootings have rocked the United States as it celebrates Independence Day. Both incidents took place on Monday evening. One in Philadelphia, where a gunman wearing a bulletproof vest opened fire in the southwest of the city, killing 5 people and injuring 2 children. Police chased the 40-year-old suspect into an alley where he surrendered. Separately, in Fort Worth, Texas, 3 people were killed and another 8 injured. A crowd had gathered in a parking lot for a July 4th celebration. Police are continuing to investigate. 7 people have been injured, 3 seriously, after a car ramming and stabbing attack in Tel Aviv, Israel. The attack happened as Israeli forces entered the second day of an ongoing raid in Jenin, in the occupied West Bank, which has drawn condemnation from the United Nations and from Washington. 10 people have died so far, including 3 children. Around 120 people have been injured. Mia Alberti has more.
Residents of the occupied West Bank are accusing Israel of committing war crimes during this raid in Jenin, which has been the largest such incursion since 2002. Residents are living under heavy gunfire and airstrikes. The Palestinian Red Cross estimates that 3,000 people have now been displaced due to the fighting, and many families spent the night at makeshift shelters in schools and mosques, but many others have been actually unable to flee due to the fighting. Those that stayed behind don't have water at the moment. There are also reports of power and internet shortages.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has approved Japan's controversial plan to release treated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima power plant into the ocean. The UN's watchdog chief, Rafael Grossi, met Prime Minister Fumio Kishida after delivering the results of its safety review. Discharge could begin within the next few weeks. FSN's Rebecca Bunden has this from Tokyo.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has said the impact that it believes it would have on fish, on the sea, on the water is actually negligible. What we also heard today from Mr. Grossi, who's the head of the agency, is he is now going to go on to visit the plant in Fukushima. That's his plan for Wednesday. He's on a 4-day visit to Japan at the moment, having met Prime Minister Kishida. And then what he wants really is for the agency to actually have an ongoing presence during this process.
Residents of Sudan's capital, Khartoum, continue to endure the effects of violent fighting over the city between forces loyal to the government and forces loyal to a rebel general. Thousands have been killed since the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces tried to take control of the country on April the 15th. Millions have been displaced. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
Yep, it is Free Talk Live. The phones are open if you want to join us here. Number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Ian, Jay, and Mark joining you tonight. You can join us online, of course, at freetalklive.com and enjoy the features there. Also, Free Talk Live this hour is brought to you by Dash. It's digital cash. We were talking earlier about protecting yourself from the potential of the CBDC, the central bank digital currency that the federal government probably is going to try to shove down people's throats at some point. It's not official yet, but it's likely in the plans. Certainly it's happening in other parts of the world. There's a big push towards these ideas because it empowers the central bank even further to inflate the money supply much easier than they already can. And so what do you do about that? Well, as presidential candidate Aaron Day was telling us about over the weekend, if you missed that interview, you can grab the Saturday night show over at archives.freetalklive.com or at video.freetalklive.com. You got to do self-custody cryptocurrencies, self-custody precious metals. You've got to take some of your value, get it out of the dollar, and put it into something that actually could hold value into the future. And it helps if you, when you're getting into cryptocurrency, it helps if you actually get into cryptos you can spend. And that is one of the things that Dash is all about. Dash is digital cash. It's a crypto designed around the idea of spending. And not many cryptos are focused on this at all. Most of them are just, oh, here's a cool tech idea, maybe number will go up. In the case of Dash, they've made a point of focusing on this, and they are undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace because of some of their really cool features, like the fact that Dash transactions are protected from the dreaded 51% attack by their chain locks technology. Dash transactions are irreversible. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, and it's great for merchants. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies out there, and it's widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. And it's also really affordable right now. I think one Dash is like $35-$36 or something like that. It's easy to get. It's easy to use Dash. You can start by learning more at dash.org. And big thanks to the Dash DAO, their decentralized autonomous organization, for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. You can visit dash.org to learn about Dash. And that is dash.org. We go back to Sarah in New Mexico. Sarah, you were saying you're upset at people setting off fireworks because you say that legal fireworks give way to illegal fireworks. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, the thing is that the legal fireworks is like for little kids, and it's no fun. And it's they have to, you know, like say you tell somebody not to do it, they're going to go out and do it even more. And so,
I can relate.
Right, and then it's usually the minors, right? There's like maybe 15, 16, or they're under 18, so that there's no penalties for them if they set somebody's roof on fire. You know, they shoot off an illegal firework.
How are they getting these illegal fireworks?
I have no idea where they're going to get it, but what I like about our HAO is there's no fireworks at all in our little HAO.
What is that, a homeowners association?
That's correct.
Uh-huh.
So we don't allow, you know, legal, illegal.
So no fun whatsoever is allowed in your neighborhood.
Well, you can have fun in the balloon park or whatever. They're going to do the fireworks. But not around here. We just don't want our houses to be caught on fire. And you know, kids, you know, if you're walking by, these kids are, all of these things they pop and crack and they can hurt people. Even the legal fireworks, you could get burned and so forth. I just don't like it. And plus, over here, they love to shoot off guns on top of it, like 4th of July.
This is highly dangerous. If somebody shoots a gun in the air, that bullet does come down, and that bullet is deadly when it does. And I did look it up as Sarah was rambling on here. There, in fact, was a house in Kansas, East Wichita, that was burned down because of fireworks. Sarah, here's what I'd say is that I completely support you and your homeowners association choosing to not, shoot off fireworks. However, I don't think that the whole world should not have fireworks because some people don't like it, right? Like the one lady doesn't like it in the homeowners association, or the little old lady's dog doesn't like it, or whatever the reasons are. Is fireworks is something fun, and people want to do fun things.
Well, the good news is, according to Reader's Digest article at rd.com, they made one of those handy little maps that shows by color what the different regulations are out there. And it looks like New Mexico does permit a majority of consumer fireworks. So if there are some that are illegal, it is a very, very small number because this is one of the most free statuses, I guess. So does New Hampshire. The only state, Jay, that has a total ban on consumer fireworks is Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah.
How's it going? Is nobody in Massachusetts setting off fireworks? Because I'll bet that it's just going pow, pow, pow all day.
Last year, there was a video that I came across. I don't know where I saw it, in somebody's show or something, but on YouTube. But so L.A., Los Angeles, it's supposed to be like a fireworks ban. I don't know if that shows up on your map there.
California is somewhat more restrictive. They permit non-aerial and non-explosive fireworks, so only the little kitty stuff.
So, anyways, so sparklers are illegal in Massachusetts. It could be. I don't know if it's a full out, right? I mean,
it says all consumer fireworks are banned in Massachusetts.
Yeah, okay. So, anyways, because I had a bunch of those in my truck the other day when I went down there. I didn't even know they were there until I got
criminal act.
So, anyways, I bought them from a 7-year-old at PorkFest, sparklers. And I was letting my 3-year-old play with them. She was having a blast. But anyways, so there's a video of like L.A. and it's like a drone footage, and it was a 4th of July or something, and just everywhere in the entire, this is like a big chunk of the city, just fireworks, the illegal fireworks just going off everywhere. Nice. So I thought that was pretty good. This homeowner association thing. My mom's got a house at a homeowner association place. I can't. I would not be able to live
like that
in a homeowner association. But the thing is that's kind of what's available for a lot of new development, because there's a lot of Agenda 21 money, I'm going to call it. So we did some research on some of these like Colorado and California developments. And what happens, you have the United Nations literally giving like a few $1 million to the developer or the contractor to basically write into the deed that there will be these regulations. And what do they call it? A convent community?
Wow.
I think because there's all these restrictions and stuff, but like
covenant,
community. And a lot of that comes right out of the UN, United Nations, and they give money to the developers and the cities and the towns to like do all this UN type homeowner association nonsense.
Well, Sarah, enjoy your boring, Independence Day. Thanks for the call. Let's go to Matthew. You're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind tonight, Matthew?
Yeah, I was just calling because you were talking about the articles about people not celebrating Independence Day, and I think that a lot of that is driven by the agenda for the people in the media that work on the left wing, because you never hear stories like that when they only make stories like that when they don't have control of the political machine. And so when they have an electoral setback, they try to use that as a way to bring that back. I mean, you never hear, like when Roe versus Wade got repealed, they didn't have stories about that. When you've got Waco and Ruby Ridge, no one said I'm not celebrating it because the government is murdering people. Or like when Obama murdered a 16-year-old American citizen in Yemen because he was visiting his father, no one was like, I'm not going to celebrate Independence Day. I mean, I live in Seattle, Washington, and there are people that have been setting off fireworks for the past 3 days, like the liberal Mecca, and fireworks are banned here. Wow. And there's a wildfire risk, and people are still doing it. So I think that it's just people that...
Well, you let me know when they're setting off fireworks in Portland. Then we'll know that America is truly patriotic.
Well, I think that, the Portland certainly got a lion's share of the media attention, but Seattle was where they were assaulting federal buildings. I remember watching protest streams in 2020 where I think that the protests were just as heavy in Seattle. Portland just gets...
I'm only teasing you.
That's okay.
I have a theory why there was...
I agree with you. Everything you've said completely. That's why I'm teasing you.
I have a theory, a little digression here on quite exactly why a whole bunch of people were burning down their own neighborhoods, essentially. First off, a lot of these people in cities that are young have, their brains were developed under influence of an internet device. And second, there was probably a whole bunch of agent provocateurs that, are able to, via the internet and chat groups and Facebook pages to sort of, get people riled up. And, and of course, they're working with the algorithm. So, if anyone knows who's going to follow the directions of an agent provocateur, the algorithm knows, Facebook knows, Google knows. This is the purpose of these algorithms, to figure out who can be an agent provocateur, who can follow along, who can do this stuff. And then, of course, we have agent provocateurs and, whoever, CIA, whatever, George Soros influencer, like, let's get together and go do this. Black Lives Matter, Antifa, whatever. So I think that that's sort of my theory right there. Is you get a bunch of algorithmic slaves who are going to do what the algorithm says, and they're just going to follow, these people that the algorithm promotes is to look up to, or the guys that are like, oh, I recognize you from the BLM chat, you're cool, I'm going to follow you, and then let's start throwing Molotov cocktails or whatever, start burning buildings down. I mean, but when you got a whole bunch of people that their whole life they've been told that, hey, well, the white people have been oppressing you, and then you got white people who are like, hey, I'm really sorry that we've been oppressing you, I'm going to join you guys and, burning down a neighborhood. We just got a lot of people that just can't think for themselves right now. They can't do logic and reasoning, mostly because the internet rewired their brain when they were young.
No, I mean, government school probably helped a lot with that.
Well, that helps too, but there's going to be a lot more of these people voting this time around, that have been rewired by the internet. So, probably whoever the algorithm tells them to vote for is going to be president, which will be interesting.
It won't matter anyway. I mean, whoever,
right.
It doesn't matter who wins. Go ahead, Matthew.
I think the algorithm aside, I think that Jay brings up a good point about when you think about like in the summer of 2020 when you had guys like Unicorn Riot and all these streamers, everything was live broadcast to the internet. And then when people started they thought that was going to help win them over. And then what happened is that the streamers started, like you would go to protests, and if you were trying to stream the content, the protesters would actually block your camera and they would start to shut you down because they realized that they thought that they had the people on their side, and most reasonable people were like, "This is ridiculous! Like you can't just go out and burn down buildings and in some cases shoot people in the streets and think that that's okay and is going to win people to your side." So I think that the algorithm certainly drives things. I don't know if I'm 100% on board with the internet connected devices thing, but I certainly think that there are a lot of people that are overplaying their hands. I'm thinking that people are going to go along with some of this violence in order to enact political change.
Thank you, Matthew, for the call tonight. I appreciate it. Let's talk to Dave Ridley on the line, calling us from, I think, New Hampshire. Dave, you're on Free Talk Live.
Yes, calling from New Hampshire.
Happy Secession Day, Dave. Welcome.
Oh, yeah, really. So I had a question for you with regard to you guys broadcast the list of things that people can do for ARIA?
Sure. Yeah, we've talked about. Aria, by the way, now 1 week behind bars in. I guess technically not behind bars. She's at a minimum security camp, so there's not even like a fence at this particular facility. But she is forced to stay there against her will. 1 week in captivity, I guess would be the appropriate way to say it, in the federal government prison system in what they call a medical facility down in Massachusetts, and I think it's called Devens, Massachusetts. If you go to ariadimezzo.com, you'll find a pinned post there to the top of her blog that has information about how to send her mail, how to contribute to her commissary account, and there was a link there on how to send her books. But we have, I think the link is still active, but the book list that she had posted, she's actually taken offline temporarily because she's had such an influx of books. She actually has too many books at the moment. They're piling up.
She wants books on chess, is what she's saying right now.
She did say that. She did put a request out on her Twitter account today asking for books on how to play chess better. She's a good chess player, but she's getting killed by some guy who she's been playing in there. So she wants to...
That'll make her better.
Yeah, she wants to bone up on some techniques, apparently. So she did request some books on chess. You'll find her prisoner number there at ariadimezzo.com and links to instructions on how to send stuff.
Can you spell
You might want to use one of the search engines to determine how to spell Aria DiMezzo, because radio isn't the best place.
Yeah, it's ARIADIMEZZO, ariadimezzo.com.
Makes you wonder if she just didn't pick the last name Smith.
It doesn't have the same ring to it, I don't think. So what else, Ridley? Anything else you wanted to share?
That was it. I was just curious. I saw a post, and it didn't have the information I was looking for in it, but ariadimezzo.com does have it, I see.
It does.
Sounds like, and it has the address that I can send mail to.
It should have everything you need there. Yeah, there's links that you can link over to the federal sites and get all that
and
stuff.
You can also, if you want to send money to the commissary, there's 3 ways to do that. I'll be doing it, but I can't do it from here. So.
Okay. Yeah, and for the listeners who don't know, she was one of your co-hosts arrested on cryptocurrency-related charges.
That is correct. You can learn more about that at thecrypto6.com. Any other comments on independence here on Independence Day, Ridley?
NHexit.us.
All right, man. Thanks for the call tonight. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. Since we were talking a little bit about independence, I know, Mark, you want to talk about federal gun possession for felons. We can get into that coming up here. But the story I mentioned last night, which is California, there's another group of people there talking about creating another state, breaking away from California. This is in apparently the northern part of California. The story coming out of the Sacramento Bee. And when considering the possibility of a 51st state, places like D.C. and Puerto Rico are likely some of the first to spring to mind. But what about a sparser alternative nestled between California and Nevada with prime views of Lake Tahoe's southern shore? A new proposal put forth by a resident and supported by at least one former county leader would have El Dorado County secede from California and become its own state. The idea is being spearheaded by county resident Sharon Durst, who spoke alongside former county supervisor Ray Nutting, an unfortunate last name, at a community meeting last month. The Mountain Democrat newspaper reported Durst also laid out the case for secession in a more than 7,000-word post published May 26th on the platform Substack. She wrote, quote, El Dorado relies mostly on its income from tourism and on the unhappy people from Sacramento, the Bay Area, and Los Angeles buying residential and second homes away from the crime-ridden metropolitan areas. She said further, the people of El Dorado County want their former livelihoods restored and their rural way of life respected. Even without its geographical major economic drivers, the people of the county are economically resilient and self-sustaining. The post opens with sentences mirroring the Declaration of Independence and makes clear that the proposal is to secede from California and become an independent U.S. state rather than secede from the United States. The new state would be known as the Republic for El Dorado State. It's a bit of a mouthful. Is the county secession plan legal? Durst argues the case for secession based on Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution, which reads, quote, Congress shall have the power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States, and nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the U.S. or of any particular state. She said in her Substack post that El Dorado County is other property under the power of Congress, not the California legislature, and that this language opens the door for the jurisdiction to divorce itself from the Golden State. So it sounds like she's saying that she doesn't have to ask, or that El Dorado County doesn't have to ask permission from the state of California to leave. It sounds like that's the argument she's making.
I would agree that it does not have to ask, I'm no constitutional scholar, but I would say it would not have to ask California, that it would simply have to ask the United States government. The United States government spoke California into existence, and it could speak El Dorado, the state of El Dorado, into existence too.
Well,
I would think that it would be an easier political ploy to become part of Nevada than it would be, which they are directly adjacent to, if that's what they wanted to do. They're up there by Tahoe, which is all you have to do. Is if you think state government matters, all you have to do, it doesn't matter. Just go to Tahoe and look at the difference between the Nevada side and the California side. It just, as soon as that state line hits, there's no businesses there because nobody's going to go to your grocery store in California
and pay
when they can go to the grocery store in Nevada or wherever.
Have you? So I take it you've been up there?
Oh yeah,
it's a
beautiful place. Even the dark specter of socialism that hangs over California cannot dim beautiful Tahoe.
The article here does point out that immediately preceding Article 4, Section 3 that she cited in her essay, it does say that, quote, no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, unquote, without the consent of the involved state legislature as well as Congress.
So here's how I go about that. What evidence does the entity calling itself State of California have that they have jurisdiction over this tract of land, this piece of dirt called El Dorado County? Because the state of California, all it is just a piece of paper in a filing cabinet. It's just a legal fiction. So how do they get jurisdiction over that land?
I think they would say they have men with guns who will come in there and enforce that jurisdiction.
Because that's the only way any of these places have jurisdiction. But for them to, present the evidence that they rely on, that they have, jurisdiction over this tract of land, over these people, how do these people become subject to the state of California, this legal fiction? And also there is, how did West Virginia become a state? Because it was part of Virginia at one time, from what I understand. And it became West Virginia. So I am sure, based on West Virginia existing,
this can happen.
That this can happen, and it should happen.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, if these guys get any traction. There's a lot of these movements, especially on the West Coast. There's the Greater Idaho movement that's been going on now, which is the idea of trying to get the eastern Oregon counties to join Idaho, to essentially secede from Oregon and become part of the state of Idaho, essentially extending Idaho out to the west. And a lot of the Oregon eastern counties have actually put a question on the ballot and have voted in favor of having their whatever you call the town councilmen or whatever, or the county commissioners, actually do something to move in this direction. So there's a movement for this.
What I think in El Dorado County could happen is if you get somebody with some cojones to be the sheriff in that county. That sheriff literally has the ability to basically say, oh, state enforcement agencies, you can't be here. Federal enforcement agencies, you can't be here. Kick all the problematic agencies out of El Dorado County. Kick out the Health and Human Services. Kick out the, all this stuff. I mean, what if there was a country that had no welfare? Right. When I say a country, each individual state in this federation called United States are individual nation states. They're countries. But what if there was a nation state like this El Dorado, and let's say they just don't do a welfare system? There's no welfare. Guess what you're not going to have if nobody is able to swipe their EBT card or use their EBT card in that state, that's federal or whatever. You're not going to have drug encampments. That's what you're not going to have. You're not going to have a whole bunch of people doing drugs. Because I know of a couple different types of people who are drug addicts. The ones that are on Kensington Street, in Philadelphia, or down here under the bridge in Manchester, begging on the side of the road. It doesn't get quite as bad in New Hampshire, because if you become a drug addict that starts stealing stuff, like shot. That one gets shot. So there really isn't that particular, thug, thieving drug addict in New Hampshire. Yeah. They're just all government subsidized drug addicts. And then you have the other drug addicts that are people who work. So I know plenty of people that are like alcoholics that are
holding down a job.
I know people. There are paving companies paving the side of the road that have a bunch of employees that work for them that are all on heroin, driving the paver, driving the skid steer, driving these dump trucks. They got a CDL. THC doesn't show up in your urine test if you're high on heroin. So that's what a lot of these guys do. And they want to do their drugs so they get up and go to work every day, because they know if they go and try to steal, they're going to end up dead. Yep. And they also like to work, and they're pretty good workers. I could tell you some of the most productive people are freaking drug addicts.
I've known some of those people. There's more coming up here if you want to weigh in on Independence Day, with one California county, some people advocating in that county, El Dorado County, for secession from the state of California, and not to join Nevada, but to start their own, the 51st state in the United States. Do they have a chance? Well, I don't know, but I like the idea. There's more coming up here in moments. It's Free Talk Live.
Negotiation isn't just something union leaders and sports agents do. Your entire day is a series of negotiations. If you have young children, you know that. In fact, your kids can teach you a lot about negotiating with grown-ups. According to the world's greatest negotiator, Herb Cohen, author of You Can Negotiate Anything. Herb says that kids understand the process of decision-making within an organization. When one parent says no, they'll ask the other. And Cohen says children persist and persevere. And like smart negotiators of all ages, kids know that no is an opening bargaining position. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important, especially if you're a job seeker. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. At least 2 mass shootings have rocked the United States as it celebrates Independence Day. Both incidents took place on Monday evening. One in Philadelphia, where a gunman wearing a bulletproof vest opened fire in the southwest of the city, killing 5 people and injuring 2 children. Police chased the 40-year-old suspect into an alley where he surrendered. Separately, in Fort Worth, Texas, 3 people were killed and another 8 injured. A crowd had gathered in a parking lot for a July 4th celebration. Police are continuing to investigate. 7 people have been injured, 3 seriously, after a car ramming and stabbing attack in Tel Aviv, Israel. The attack happened as Israeli forces entered the second day of an ongoing raid in Jenin, in the occupied West Bank, which has drawn condemnation from the United Nations and from Washington. 10 people have died so far, including 3 children. Around 120 people have been injured. Mia Alberti has more.
Residents of the occupied West Bank are accusing Israel of committing war crimes during this raid in Jenin, which has been the largest such incursion since 2002. Residents are living under heavy gunfire and airstrikes. The Palestinian Red Cross estimates that 3,000 people have now been displaced due to the fighting, and many families spent the night at makeshift shelters in schools and mosques, but many others have been actually unable to flee due to the fighting. Those that stayed behind don't have water at the moment. There are also reports of power and internet shortages.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has approved Japan's controversial plan to release treated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima power plant into the ocean. The UN's watchdog chief, Rafael Grossi, met Prime Minister Fumio Kishida after delivering the results of its safety review. Discharge could begin within the next few weeks. FSN's Rebecca Bunden has this from Tokyo.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has said the impact that it believes it would have on fish, on the sea, on the water is actually negligible. What we also heard today from Mr. Grossi, who's the head of the agency, is he is now going to go on to visit the plant in Fukushima. That's his plan for Wednesday. He's on a 4-day visit to Japan at the moment, having met Prime Minister Kishida. And then what he wants really is for the agency to actually have an ongoing presence during this process.
Residents of Sudan's capital, Khartoum, continue to endure the effects of violent fighting over the city between forces loyal to the government and forces loyal to a rebel general. Thousands have been killed since the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces tried to take control of the country on April the 15th. Millions have been displaced. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. The British government has moved quickly to quash efforts by local political leaders in Orkney, an island archipelago off the northeastern coast of Scotland, to break away and join Norway. It's an astonishing proposal and reflects deep disquiet among some in Orkney about the way in which they've been treated by the governments in both London and Edinburgh. The council in the remote chain of islands is debating whether to explore alternative models of governance that might open up fresh economic opportunities, with some members favouring a return to Norway, the country that controlled Orkney until the year 1472.
My mother always used to say that it was quicker to get to Bergen than it was to get to Edinburgh, and the shopping was cheaper there.
Former editor of The Scotsman, Magnus Linklater, who was born in Orkney.
The majority of members of the Scottish Parliament live in Edinburgh, Glasgow, or in between, and they tend to focus on their own concerns. It's been, I think, one of the disappointing aspects of devolution. We all thought that once power came up to Edinburgh, places like the Highlands and Orkney and the Western Isles would receive greater attention. It hasn't quite worked out that way, and Orkney feels that quite strongly.
But UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's spokesman says there is no mechanism for Orkney to depart the UK and said, "We are stronger as one United Kingdom." With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, 7 people have been injured, 3 seriously after a car ramming and stabbing attack in Tel Aviv. A gunman in the US city of Philadelphia has killed 5 people and injured 2 children. 3 people have been shot dead in a separate incident in Fort Worth, Texas. And Japan has been approved to release treated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima power plant back into the ocean. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
It's now been 7 days since a group of hikers went missing in Maine's Acadia National Park, but rescue crews there are still holding out hope of finding them alive. Autistic reporter Michael Falk is on the scene there. Michael.
Hello, Brooke. My socks got wet. That cameraman gave me new socks. I am fine.
That's good, Michael, but what's the situation there?
The names of the hikers are Casey Allman, Brian Emery, Ashley Thorson. The hikers were last seen 174 hours ago. Since then, 3 very big storms have hit here. There's a 1.24% chance that all of the hikers are alive. Why are you looking for the hikers?
Well, we're still hopeful that we might be able to find them. There's been a break in the weather, so we're hoping that...
Over the past 7 days, the average high temperature has been 21 degrees Fahrenheit. Over the past 7 days, the average low temperature has been 6 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right. So we did another sweep of the park from the air, but we didn't see anything.
Without shelter, the human body can withstand temperatures this cold for a maximum of 3 hours. Is there shelter in the forest for the hikers?
Not that we know of.
They are frozen.
Well, we like
Shh. This is the Onion News Network.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, kicking off the 3rd hour here. You can join us on this Independence Day edition of the show. For those of you that actually give a damn about independence, most people today, no, I don't know if it's most of them, but a lot of people today, 4 out of 10, according to one survey, don't even know what the point of this holiday is. But we're here to remind you that it is about independence, which is to say declaring independence from tyrants. They declared independence from the tyrant king in Great Britain back in the day, and it's about time that we declared independence from the tyrants in Washington, D.C. It's time for this to happen again. In fact, it would be better to get out from underneath D.C. now rather than whenever it is that it all comes crashing down economically. And you can get out from them economically, as we were discussing earlier, by protecting yourself by looking at getting into cryptocurrency or precious metals. So there are ways sort of out, but not completely out, where you can protect your own wealth or your family's wealth. But then to actually get out from underneath the political apparatus would be an ideal situation as well. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Jay.
And Mark.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He's still there. Yeah, he's on Costa Rica tonight.
Another thing we could add to how you can be independent is instead of watching Netflix, instead of, just scrolling through TikTok or YouTube or Facebook, learn a skill, exercise that skill, whatever it is. Blacksmithing is something I like teaching kids to do. It's a fun thing. It's a confidence builder, but just learn a skill and become valuable. And just think how if New Hampshire was able to do direct trading with, say, Vladimir Putin, right, or a Gazprom, is that what the Russian oil company is called? We can just, I think so, yeah. Because so New Hampshire's not, because we got lots of granite to drill through, and we're not really in I don't know, maybe there is oil in New Hampshire, I'm not sure, but there's definitely a bunch of oil out west.
Yeah.
But we could buy cheap energy if we wanted to. In fact, I really like the idea of having several of these very safe nuclear power plants. I think they're called like thorium reactors. I'm not really so sure about. I'm not.
I'll take any nuclear power. When you compare the amount of deaths that have occurred since 3 Mile Island with from oil, just the petroleum, hydrocarbons generally, versus all the deaths that have occurred from nuclear power. Nuclear power is by far the safest thing. Even old, antiquated nuclear power, forget the meltdown-proof thorium reactors, which are still experimental, but will likely be some amazing technology in the future.
The new tech nuclear stuff is really exciting from what we've heard.
Yeah, that's what I really like. My father-in-law, I spent a little time with him last week, and he worked in the nuclear power plant he worked in the nuclear power plants for pretty much his entire engineering career. And but he worked over at that one in Portsmouth for a long time. I forget what that one's called. That's where he put over 20 years in there. And he just loves the idea of a thorium reactor. And in fact, he's one of these guys. We were somewhere talking about a nuclear power plant, and some lady says to him, "Would you like a nuclear power plant in your backyard?" And he said,
Absolutely.
"Actually," he goes, "you could put it right underneath my bed if you wanted to."
Yeah. Well, again, the thorium ones can't be melted down, and they've come up with these little mini power plants that can power a whole neighborhood from like a relatively small little container, essentially, as I understand it. So you could pop one of those things out in your the side of your house, right next to your your air conditioner or whatever it is that's out there, and sell power to your neighbors if you wanted to for God knows how long. Jay, you're talking about learning a skill. I know that a couple of weeks ago you were over at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which is something we spent a lot of time talking about. Our co-host Aria DiMezzo, before she went to prison, was doing live broadcasts or recorded broadcasts there from the campground. And I don't think she had a chance to talk to you as far as an interview is concerned, but you were probably really busy over there at Man Camp, which is something you've been telling our listeners about here. You did some fundraising for it to try to teach not just kids, but also adults, anybody who comes to Man Camp, to help them learn a skill, something that they didn't already know about, like how to what were you doing over there?
So basically, I was just teaching kids how to forge iron. So I had a propane forge set up. Basically, it's all my stuff when I was horseshoeing. So all the equipment I had there, I've actually had for nearly 20 years now.
Oh, wow.
But when I was from the time I was 12 to the time I was about 25, one of my things I did was put shoes on horses. So when I was 21 years old or 22 years old, I bought out a guy all of his equipment, the forge, the anvil, a lot of the stuff that I had there. So I had that set up. And then I made these smaller anvils that I made. So I didn't make a small anvil. So I got a small anvil, and we set that up just on a like a 12-inch tall stump, from just a piece of firewood that you would split instead of splitting it. We just left it the round, and I had the little anvil on there. So like 5- and 6-year-old kids could be at their waist height. In fact, my kids were banging on it the whole time that we weren't operating man camp, and anyways, because my kids are a little too small to be playing with, molten hot metal and swinging it around. I let them actually take the hammer and just bang on cold iron and put safety glasses on. They like that, but anyways, we make coat hook hangers. We made some other ornamental art, some more functional art, a bunch of like a squirrel cooker. Was one of the things. It's basically like a big long fork that you make out of twisting wire steel together, 3/16 rod. I set up like a custom anvil setup for these young kids to bang on. I had different size hammers, and so I had a 6-year-old. His name's Warner. He did a fantastic job. He made his own coat hook. He was could really tell a lot about the parenting of these kids and sort of how they're brought up. Just kind of by working with him, and his parents are doing a fantastic job with him because he just followed all the directions really good. He was really focused on it. But this is also a family; they're homeschoolers. The kids don't use internet devices, and so he made a coat hook, and actually he did it in about 30 minutes, which was pretty good. And then I had another kid that did a project, and he had a TikTok attention span, and I had to keep him going, get him back on track every time as we were, forging this project together. And his dad was doing it with him. But the kid, he did a good job. He was really into it, and he just, I just had to keep on redirecting them. Kind of like Mark and Ian, both you guys have had many dogs, and there are dogs that, for example, as soon as they see a squirrel, they're all interested in that squirrel, and you got to yell at them or get them back. I didn't have to yell at this kid. I'm like, nope, just keep on hammering, buddy. Okay, stop, and we're going to heat it up again. And so what was really so it was fun. So I definitely get a dopamine hit off of building confidence in young people. And that's kind of the whole thing with Man Camp is to reinstate confidence in mankind. And, one of the things that, kids were doing 200 years ago out, in rural America, every homestead had a forge, had an anvil, had a way to manipulate some metal because you needed this stuff. So, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids, they were helping out in a blacksmith shop. They were doing whatever. And, that helped make a confident generation that really built this country to be, what it became when it was great. And there was, I should have had the numbers all written down, but there was probably 20 kids that did it that were, say...
Over the week?
Yeah, over the week that were under 18, I'm going to guess. And there was, 10 or 15, adults that, made some Man Camp projects. For example, Derek Slopey of Agorist Hosting, who's another guy who was a sponsor of Man Camp. He donated some tools. He donated some money, some equipment. He made himself a cool project as there wasn't any young kids around. And actually, he helped with a lot of kids. And Ernest Hancock helped out also. Ernest was real good. And Ernie and Derek, these guys are kind of like pretty independent guys anyways. They got a lot of confidence. They sort of have a lot of skills. They're, they've been entrepreneurs their entire lives.
This wasn't their first time at Man Camp either.
Nope, this wasn't their first time. But it was handy having those guys help out. Taryn Lupo, a lot of people here know Taryn Lupo. He's a chiropractor up there at Rogers Campground. Great guy.
He lives there part-time now.
Yeah, lives there part-time. And then he's got a homestead somewhere in the Carolinas. He's in the wintertime. But Taryn Lupo made a project, and actually my brother Josh jumped in and helped him out with that. And my brother Josh is a really good blacksmith. He actually used to do these blacksmithing competitions all the time, but it was based around horseshoeing. So these guys would make their horseshoes from a piece of, just steel stock, piece of bar stock, custom-made horseshoes. So Josh still does that as part of his career. He makes custom shoes a lot. So he basically fires up a forge, 5 days a week and, hammers out, some kind of iron. And he's a really good bladesmith. So him and Taryn made a pretty awesome project. The girl that did all of our babysitting this year was really good, 16-year-old girl. Her name's Zoe. And she is working on becoming an entrepreneur. She is an entrepreneur, and she makes jewelry.
This isn't little Zoe from the pizza.
Nope.
Okay.
I don't even know Zoe's last name.
Okay, all right.
But anyways, so at the end of it all, she babysat my kids and did a great job with them. Took them to the playground, which was real handy. And at the end of it all, she wanted to make a bunch of display hooks. So I got her going on making display hooks just out of some stock that we had. You can make anything you want out of metal, for like display hooks, all kinds of stuff. And so these are display hooks to hang her jewelry and stuff she sells at her vending setup. So she made, 7 to 10 different hooks and kind of made them all different styles and all different ways and had a good time doing it. And
cool.
And but a lot of moms were very intimidated by letting their little boy come over and
overprotective.
Well, they were just intimidated. I wouldn't say overprotective because every kid half the kids that were interested in it definitely got to do it.
Okay.
So I didn't run Man Camp that many hours. I basically ran it from 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock till about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock because my son takes a nap about midday, and we didn't want to be out there banging right outside the camper while he's trying to take a nap. And life's a lot easier when the baby can take a nap, a good nap, come evening and afternoon.
Okay.
So we didn't get quite as many hours as I would have.
Were you able to bring in the professionals that you'd wanted to hire? You wanted to bring some people in?
Well, not really, but sort of. So my brother Josh, absolutely, he's a professional.
Sure.
So he was real busy. He wasn't like looking to be hired to do anything, but he just jumped in and helped out Taryn with his project because it was something my brother was interested in, that Taryn was making. Yeah. And then he also helped us like get set up, and he also helped me break the situation down. My other brother Christopher couldn't make it, and it's probably a good thing because I did put out. I offered to pay $1,000 to my one brother Christopher to just get him up there and do it, but he was in the middle of making hay. He took on a bunch of hay ground and got a bunch of hay equipment, so he was making hay. He couldn't come, but basically the money that got donated, pretty much basically all of it got burnt right up just in expenses.
Wow.
Well,
and what, like the metal or? So
I bought some metal. I bought some safety gear. I bought some tools. I hired a babysitter. I had to go back down and get another trailer, full of all the equipment and gear. So like that was just $100 in fuel, basically round trip from my place to Rogers. Then got to go back up, get the trailer, bring it back, and then also there was paying for the campground. All that stuff adds up, and the reason I was trying to put a $5,000 to get $5,000 was because I was hopeful to, after everything, have money left over to pay me for just my time in doing it, because what I've been doing the last 3 years at Pork Fest is selling beef that I raise. Well, pork and beef that either I raise or Bardo Farm raises. And this year I brought some of the equipment. I was going to do breakfast because breakfast was been popular, but I ended up not even setting up the cooking equipment. I just wouldn't have any time. I just did the mornings with my kids. We'd go to the playground and just go run around and do stuff. And then, and usually in the mornings I'm doing farming chores with my kids anyways. But like the last couple of years I was able to, after all the expenses of Pork Fest with the meat, I was basically able to pay half of the property tax. My property tax.
Your property tax at your house.
Yeah, half the property tax just off selling the meat. So, I think last year I did like $6,000 or $7,000 total.
But last year that was what you were focused on. You didn't have man camp.
Right, didn't have man camp, and you really can't do both of them. So basically, it's like
so selling the meat did better than the man camp did,
or dollars wise. Yeah, but selling the meat didn't raise anyone's confidence. It didn't give kids cool ideas. It wasn't. Nobody. I mean, actually, a lot of people were disappointed that I wasn't selling. Cooking food.
I bet
it gives a lot of families sustainably raised meat that. I mean, it's hard to quantify the value of that, but I can tell you I served a lot of families in New Hampshire for some years with humanely raised meat, and you can't put a number on it.
Right.
Although some did, although everybody did, and I did too.
So the bottom line is I got so much positive feedback and text messages, pictures. In fact, I got another message yesterday from a guy. He says the coat hook my son made still hasn't been mounted because he just wants to bring it everywhere to show everyone. He's been showing it to his friends, to his grandmother, nice. Everyone that comes around, and he's like, what a confidence builder, this was in my son. Another guy, he was one of the first guys to come and do it with his son. He came back around on Sunday before he left, and he's like, "Hey, man, I really want to thank you a lot." And he gave me $50.
Okay, all right.
And I said, "I want to thank you a lot. This is really awesome. This forging exercise, this blacksmithing that you're doing here, has caused these kids to level up their character in the game we call life." And I said, "Yep, you know what my dad called that? My dad called it manning up. You gotta." My dad had two terms. There was cowboy up. You just need to cowboy up a little bit, and the cowboy up is like when you're gonna get on that horse that's like snorting and swishing his tail and probably gonna buck you off. That's a cowboy up situation. And then there was like manning up was just it had to do it no matter what. You don't have to cowboy up, but you have to man up.
Okay.
And was sort of the thing. So. But yeah, and so anyways, the moms that were concerned. So the moms were definitely watching some of these kids, and they're like concerned, and I'm like, I go, if you don't think your son can handle this, you get right in here and help out too. So they did. A couple of moms were just swinging hammers and doing it and having a great job. In fact, one of the first people who did man camp was like a 38-year-old woman.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have any kids. But, as soon as she swung that hammer 2 or 3 times, and she had it and was doing it really well. And, but she's like, oh, yeah. She goes, my grandfather taught me how to swing a hammer. And so another thing I did at man camp for the little kids that couldn't do the hot forging is I just let them bang nails into some wood I had.
Okay.
So we had the hammers and we had some nails. And I also let them use my impact driver screw gun thing. So they were just running screws into like the block of wood that the anvil was on, and they were banging nails into it. I'm just letting them sink nails into it. And one little girl comes over. Her name's Molly. She's 5. And Molly and my daughter Cypress are buddies. And Molly's like, we can play with adult tools. I'm like, yes, you can. She's like, I'm going to hang out over here all the time. And she's just, taking a hammer, banging the anvil. And she's actually taking screws that you screw in, and she starts banging them in the wood, which is fine. I don't care, And I'm like, you guys can do this, but you got to wear safety glasses. So I bought like a bunch of child-sized safety glasses, and I bought small safety glasses. So, and I bought like small gloves. So there's plenty of gloves. I bought a bunch of aprons, and I got way too many aprons. So I bought aprons, and then the order gets like kicked back off Amazon, or it says, oh, we're going to have a delay. And I'm like, I was trying to like June 2nd, I bought these aprons because I wanted to have like things ordered by my goal was June 1st.
Get it done.
And so by the time I get the money converted from crypto into Amazon gift card, which I did like 7 different ways to make it happen, which was interesting. But anyways, they're like, oh, this isn't going to be here until, July 10th. And, if you need it sooner, or, you can choose similar products from these guys. So I went I guess I didn't cancel that order. I thought I did. And so I went and I ordered like similar products from other guys and I did get from other vendors on Amazon. They were a little more money. But it showed up before Pork Fest, so I had it. But when I got home, I had a bunch more because I forgot to cancel the order.
Other one came through.
It was there when I got home. But some things about man camp is the moms were sort of relieved after they saw other little kids doing it. And then there was one boy. He was 12, and I think he was into video games, but. His mom was like very concerned about him getting hurt, and she was probably a hover mom, and
helicopter parent.
Yeah, but she let him. Actually, as soon as he started doing it, she walked away, so she wasn't that helicopter.
All right, that's not bad.
She's like, "Can I leave now?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, he's cool." And but they watched the 6-year-old boy Warner just like crank out. Like Warner did such a good job. I wish I had video of him doing it. But I told him he could do man camp like 3 days before he actually got to do it. And every day he's like, Mom, can I go do man camp today? No, you can't. That's going to be on Thursday or whatever day he was doing man camp. We kind of scheduled his. And but after that mom, after they saw the 6-year-old boy make this and just handling everything, and I had him handling the tongs, and I was using vice grips too to hold the hot stuff so the kids could just hold on to the vice grip and not, because tongs you have to like squeeze them with your hand. It's a little more of a challenge. But that 6-year-old he cranked it out and did awesome. The mom was like, oh, my 12-year-old can do that. But the 12-year-old boy, he was worn out halfway through making making his coat hook. The same project a 6-year-old boy did, but the 6-year-old boy is like an outdoors boy. He's doing stuff. He's active. The 12-year-old boy, I never met him before. I don't know who the family was, but he's like he kind of wanted to give up halfway through, and I'm like, dude, really, you're tired? I go, that 6-year-old kid over there, and he's like, oh, he's 6. I'm like, he's half your size. The Warner was already gone, and so the 12-year-old boy is like, oh, okay, I can do this. And then and I kind of had to just convince him not to. He's like, I think I'm okay. I'm like, we can't hang this hook on the wall yet. It's useless. It's only 3/4 of the way built. Let's go. So like he's like, oh, my arm's never been so sore. And so he swinging a hammer for 15
probably
minutes.
Hadn't.
Right.
Okay.
He definitely didn't know how to swing a hammer. That was like the first 5 minutes of the thing.
I see.
So But all the like 3, 4, and 5-year-olds who are banging screws and nails into the boards, they learned how to swing a hammer. So yeah, the kid was like, his mother came back and he's like, thank you for convincing my son to get his job done. He was very happy with
Nice. Got the follow through on that one. All right, there's more coming up here. Jay Noon's Man Camp. You can share your thoughts on whatever's on your mind. We'll get a chance to talk about felons and guns in the United States as well. It's Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
As long as the majority of people say that you can't smoke in public, or the majority of people say you can't have a windmill in your yard, or the majority of people say you can't wear your pants down around your butt, or the majority of people say that you can't contract to live with the person you want to live with, or the majority of the people say that you've got to pay for public schools. As long as the majority says it, it must be okay, because crowds have wisdom. Oh, come on.
Nonsense.
Crowds lynched people for being witches.
There's so many instances in history where we acknowledge now that the majority was massively and horribly wrong.
Yes.
Why aren't we acknowledging it? Look, we've had precedent for that. Why aren't we acknowledging it now in terms of how we decide how we're going to interact with each other? That, look, maybe that's not a good way to figure out right and wrong. That the majority believes in a certain thing. And that's how we find out right from wrong.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. At least 2 mass shootings have rocked the United States as it celebrates Independence Day. Both incidents took place on Monday evening. One in Philadelphia, where a gunman wearing a bulletproof vest opened fire in the southwest of the city, killing 5 people and injuring 2 children. Police chased the 40-year-old suspect into an alley where he surrendered. Separately, in Fort Worth, Texas, 3 people were killed and another 8 injured. A crowd had gathered in a parking lot for a July 4th celebration. Police are continuing to investigate. 7 people have been injured, 3 seriously, after a car ramming and stabbing attack in Tel Aviv, Israel. The attack happened as Israeli forces entered the second day of an ongoing raid in Jenin, in the occupied West Bank, which has drawn condemnation from the United Nations and from Washington. 10 people have died so far, including 3 children. Around 120 people have been injured. Mia Alberti has more.
Residents of the occupied West Bank are accusing Israel of committing war crimes during this raid in Jenin, which has been the largest such incursion since 2002. Residents are living under heavy gunfire and airstrikes. The Palestinian Red Cross estimates that 3,000 people have now been displaced due to the fighting, and many families spent the night at makeshift shelters in schools and mosques, but many others have been actually unable to flee due to the fighting. Those that stayed behind don't have water at the moment. There are also reports of power and internet shortages.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has approved Japan's controversial plan to release treated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima power plant into the ocean. The UN's watchdog chief, Rafael Grossi, met Prime Minister Fumio Kishida after delivering the results of its safety review. Discharge could begin within the next few weeks. Ever since Rebecca Bunden has this from Tokyo.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has said the impact that it believes it would have on fish, on the sea, on the water is actually negligible. What we also heard today from Mr. Grossi, who's the head of the agency, is he is now going to go on to visit the plant in Fukushima. That's his plan for Wednesday. He's on a 4-day visit to Japan at the moment, having met Prime Minister Kishida. And then what he wants really is for the agency to actually have an ongoing presence during this process.
Residents of Sudan's capital, Khartoum, continue to endure the effects of violent fighting over the city between forces loyal to the government and forces loyal to a rebel general. Thousands have been killed since the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces tried to take control of the country on April the 15th. Millions have been displaced. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join the show here if you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And it's Ian J. and Mark Mark joining you here tonight.
So the lady from the Springs is supposed to come in.
I don't know what Mark's doing over there. It sounds like somebody's talking. That's not Mark. Just have to turn him down for a moment. The number is 603-283-6160. Mark is joining us all the way from down in Costa Rica. Mark, are you with us?
Yeah, we were trying to get the internet back here. Terribly
okay,
sorry.
good. Well, it seems like you're okay. So glad to have you.
I don't know
here.
what you're going to do. It's like wishing. We were wishing hard the internet would come back.
Here you are. We're talking with Jay Noon. He's given us a recap of the Man Camp experience at this year's Porcupine Freedom Festival. It's something that you started up a few years back, maybe even several years ago. Jay, do you remember what year it was that Man Camp premiered?
I did it 2019.
2019, and that was at the Porcupine Freedom Festival.
Yes.
And then did you do it the year after, and then you took a couple years off, or no, it was just a one-off? Okay.
Well, so we had Cyprus a year after.
Okay.
And the 2019 thing was just like, it was a big financial hit. I spent, I think on 2019, it was something like $3,400 worth of costs going into it, including the site, the equipment. I brought too much equipment. I bought a bunch of stuff. And people got to understand, it takes me like a whole week to just put this together before I even go there. When I say a whole week, maybe 60 hours of my time.
And that's money you would or time you would normally be spending working for other people doing other things.
So I was like, all right, I can't do that. And I wasn't interested in doing that. We had, Cypress was 4 months old, and now Cypress is 3, and my son is almost 2, and I had arranged for a babysitter. So because we had the babysitter, we were able to do, I was able to do this at limited hours a day. And but really everything comes down to dollars. But so and then I we also had the next year we had all the the pork that we had raised. So I sold a bunch of that. And that's actually the most lucrative thing you can do is cook food at Pork Fest, because
there's a lot of competition.
Actually, this year there was a lot of competition. So I sold I brought frozen beef, and I brought a bunch of Bardo Farm pork products to sell, and I only think I sold $800 worth of meat.
But you weren't cooking it. You were just selling it.
That was all just frozen. So a whole bunch of campers bought hamburger patties off me, and ground beef and sausage links. And then Autonomy Unlimited. I think it's autonomyunlimited.com. They have a bunch of their autonomy graduates and students, which that's a really awesome course what Autonomy's doing. But anyways, Autonomy Cafe they had set up there, so they bought a bunch of beef and patties off me.
Right. Okay, that's cool.
And but they only bought $350 worth of beef patties that they had sold. They had bought some steaks and some other pork cuts off of Bardo Farm they had sold. But there was a lot of people cooking, but there was a whole bunch of people. There was a whole bunch of people that wanted to fill their coolers and leave, and half of them, never made it to me. I stayed there till Monday, but a handful of people did. They filled up their coolers with meat from me, and before they left, which was cool. But it wasn't bad, because I just put a chest freezer in my trailer. When I get up to Rogers, I plug it in, and then just it's a 2-hour drive. So it isn't like I went up there with coolers and everything's defrosted.
Yeah,
and I'm
you kept it cold.
Yep, they keep it cold. So that was all good, and but I put a lot of time and effort into it, and basically it was like I did 3+ weeks worth of work, essentially just for not getting paid.
Oh yeah, I mean it's hard. Even though there's 2,000 people there and everybody appreciates the work.
Yep.
It's activism is something that you do because of that psychic income. Yep. You do because you love it, because you are making a difference. It would be nice if you could actually make money at it, but man, it is hard to do.
Now that we definitely got some interest with some other people involved. There's another freedom event that they approached me about doing this, and it'll be August till I know more about that, if that's going to happen and how it's going to happen. So
they want you to take Man Camp on the road.
Yes.
Nice.
Yep. So because
it'd be great if someone could actually sponsor the whole thing and pay for the whole thing.
Yep. And for example, Mark Warden, Porcupine Real Estate, sends me a text message a week before Pork Fest. He's like, hey, I want to send you some money to be to sponsor Man Camp.
Oh, nice.
And he just sent me some money. It was it wasn't the biggest donation, but it was certainly in the top 10, and it didn't quite cover the babysitting bill. but still, it was nice. And
he was your only sponsor, right?
Well, not. Yes, basically at Pork Fest, for Pork Fest, he was the only sponsor. And then we had, so one guy, an anonymous donator, donated us a $2,500 Bitcoin.
It's amazing.
Which was really handy. And then a few, I think so on the crypto donations, I think it was like $27.50.
So the majority of the donations was crypto.
Right. Yeah. If you went by the day that they were donated, but like when I was actually buying some of the things, turning that crypto into like Amazon gift cards, for example, to buy supplies, the crypto was down like 12 or 15%, so it's kind of the way it
now
went.
It's back up.
Yeah. Now it's, like if I looked at $2,500 donation, it's close to a $3,000, value.
Too late, but
today's. But when I spent, 12 or 1,400 of it on things, it was like a $2,100 value when I had to spend it. But that's what happens sometimes.
By the way, since you mentioned Mark Warden, we should point out he does do Porcupine Real Estate, and that is a great organization to get you connected with real estate here in New Hampshire. If you're considering making the move up here, whether you've been to the Porcupine Freedom Festival or whether you've checked it out, taken the time to visit New Hampshire yet, you can get in touch with the folks over at Porcupine Real Estate, and they will invite you to some webinars. They've got multiple topics they're going to be focusing on here, and they've been doing. In fact, you can go to their YouTube channel, which is called Porcupine Real Estate. You can watch the previous webinars that they've had there and get a feel for what they've been covering. But they're including gun freedoms, medical freedoms, political freedom victories. They've got presentations about best practices on moving to New Hampshire and best practices on finding housing. You can sign up for these upcoming webinars by going to move.freetalklive.com. They're free to attend. You just have to go and get registered. Just move.freetalklive.com. Go to that site. That takes you over to the Porcupine Real Estate website, and that's where you can get signed up. These guys know their business. They know real estate. They know New Hampshire. I think they're almost all free staters there at Porcupine Real Estate. They know the community. They know some of the cool stuff that's happening up here, and they'll be able to answer a lot of your questions on these webinars. So drop on into move.freetalklive.com to get signed up for those upcoming webinars. Do you have any other Man Camp stories, Jay, that you want to share?
Yeah, so and just to say, Mark Warden of Porcupine Real Estate and Porcupine Real Estate in general, they've always been so supportive to like a lot of just good stuff happening here in New Hampshire, and they're bringing quality people to New Hampshire. I've met a lot of people that have bought homes. My sister bought her house through those guys. She's very happy with the deal. A lot of they're good. So there was some parents that did Man Camp 5, or kids that did Man Camp 5 years ago. They weren't here, but a couple of their parents, like one guy, he just came up to me and handed me $100 bill. He's like, my kids aren't even here. They did this. This really helped them so much. I love what you're doing. I wish I could give you more, but here you go.
Oh, that's cool.
So that was cool.
Feeling. Yeah.
And the thing is it's a lot of prep work. It's a lot of equipment. It's a lot of time, and working one-on-one with like a 6-year-old for an hour to like make a coat hook or make 2 coat hooks, is as a mechanic at home, I get $125 an hour for that, and a lot of, and we didn't charge anybody there. If somebody wanted to donate something, they could.
That's nice.
And yeah. So it's fun, and the confidence building is huge, and it
would have been interesting if the kids that went 5 years ago had come back, and you could kind of see how they'd changed in the last 5 years, and maybe they'd be able to comment on how Man Camp helped them in their lives. I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting to kind of have a Man Camp follow-up.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I know who a few of those are. But there was 2 kids there. One of them, I believe, is 18, Macy, and Colby is 20, and they did it 5 years ago.
Oh, okay, so you did have.
But, they didn't come do Man Camp again.
They just stopped by.
They just stopped by. They said, hi,
That's
this is
nice.
cool, this is fun, glad you're doing this. And,
nice.
and they were kind of just more having a good time on their own, just enjoying it. But also even like the boy Colby, he's like, oh, I don't even have any pants. All I got is flip flops and shorts, for example. There was so I'm gonna on my website jaynoon.com.
It's JAYNOONE.com.
I will be working on updating that soon to prepare for fundraising for the Next Man Camp event.
Okay.
If you still wanted to give those,
not too late.
Those QR codes are up there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I gotta definitely do a lot of extra work to make up for not earning any money for a couple weeks, for sure. But anyways, it was a good experience. I learned a lot, and I'm getting better at this. And I'm going to. What I really want to do is I want to do this weekly at my house.
Oh wow! Okay.
I'm actually this week I'm going to build a little setup so I can just leave my forge and anvil kind of all set up outside, but so it's not getting directly rained on, and then I can just fire it up and just do it. And so I'm going to start by just charging like an hourly rate for like just to come do it and see what happens.
Yeah, you gotta make something at this.
And I also have a deal with tomorrow. I got a kid coming, a 14-year-old, and him and I are going to build some gates. Some loading gates for moving hogs back and forth that we can back the trailer up to and put them into their pens. Nice gates, and we're going to use the forge, the anvil, and the welder. And the 14-year-old kid really wants to weld, and he's been working at Bardo Farm, and he wants to level up his game. So he's going to come tomorrow, and we'll see what happens.
Very cool. All right, Mark, any questions for Jay? You've been kind of sitting out there quietly.
Well, I can only say as a father, I wish my son was doing this particular activity. But then again, like I guess I wish I should be doing it too.
That's a thing. So the campfire cooker set that we make, so you can make either a tripod thing to like hang like a Dutch oven from, or it can be made as like a spit. You put these two things into the ground, and you have a bar going across, and you can hang hooks off it, and you could actually take like a 60-pound pig and put it around the spit and wire it on there and cook it, or you can do it with chickens. We've done it with chickens, like Silver Dave did his, and Luke Radowski a couple years ago in 2020, we did the survival apocalypse training, and that's what we did. We everybody caught a chicken, and then they killed the chicken. They came and did this survival apocalypse training, and they skinned it, and then they cooked it on a spit over a campfire. That was part of the deals. So anyways, you can make a campfire cooker set, which is a really good family thing to do. And I really encourage dads and moms to get in there and just do the hammering on these projects, because you take like a 6-year-old kid who hasn't swung a hammer much, it wears him out quick. I mean, I watched a 12-year-old get worn out real quick. And then like the one 7-year-old kid, him and his dad did it, and it went really fast because, dad, an adult can hammer quite well, can bang iron good, versus a kid. And when and that kind of like working with dad and presenting that, and that just helps their relationship, makes that bond stronger. And even the one mom who participated with her kid, they just you could tell that definitely some neurons had to fire in both of their brains, to make it all happen. So, and which is good. That's what we want. We want to exercise the brain and exercise the confidence.
New experience, for sure. You mentioned Silver Dave. He's somebody we've had on the show from time to time as a guest or a guest co-host. He used to do this like really fancy cooking at Pork Fest and Fork Fest, where he would announce in advance like what the meal was going to be, and it would be like lemon crusted fish, salmon freshly purchased from the market with like fancy veggies and everything. Like it'd be a $25 plate, but it would be the best damn food on the campground.
$40 plate now.
Yeah. Well, is he even doing it now? Because it looked like he was doing all Silver Dave silver stuff.
Only silver.
Year. Yeah.
So he's got his silver line is Heavy Metal Construction, and localsilvermint.com, I think is where you find him. But
so these were the years where he was sort of out of the silver game, and he was doing custom cooking for people. And I had to tell Bonnie, I was like, man, it's a shame Silver Dave isn't cooking this year, because he was the best on the whole campground. But glad to see he was doing something else.
Last year, when he did all the cooking, he's like, the week after Pork Fest is Dave was just inviting all of his friends over to the domes and cooking them up filet mignons and lemon crusted sahi something tuna or whatever, and we were just having gourmet meals almost every other night, because
awesome.
he had all this leftover stuff. So
Well, he must not have done well, because the years he was
Right.
cooking previous to that, he would sell out every
Yep.
single night.
He didn't sell out last year.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
so it was the Autonomy Cafe kind of did the gourmet cooking. So they did lobster tail and they
Okay.
did steak and they did some kind of
I'm glad
fish.
someone filled in the gaps. That's
yeah,
good.
yeah, they filled in the gaps. But there was a lot of food there, and a lot of families brought food because you bring like you, your wife, and 3 kids to Pork
Yeah,
Fest.
it's gonna add
you
up.
could burn $200 a day just in
yeah.
food. Or you can spend, $300 at the grocery store and, feed yourself, for the entire week.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. Yeah, I mean, for me, going to that event, as someone without a family, part of the fun is going around to the different food vendors and seeing what all's out there. And Bonnie and I were able to come up for 2 days of Pork Fest this year. We also went up for 1 day of Fork Fest, which is the decentralized alternative festival that happens prior to the Porcupine Freedom Festival. And there's been actually a lot of talk. I mean, every year after Pork Fest is done, the Fork Festers are always talking about, like, all right, well, what do we do next year? And it seems like there's a larger interest in Fork Fest in 2024, at least right now. Hopefully that will continue on. Folks like Taryn Lupo, you mentioned earlier, who's very well-known chiropractor within the community and a content producer as well. He says he wants to zero in on Fork Fest and like go and actually invite some of the people that used to come to the Porcupine Freedom Festival all the time and they just haven't been for years, and try to like reach out to them directly. People like some of our former co-hosts like Sam Dodson and people like that, and say, hey, come on back, come up to Fork Fest. Like if you still don't want to go to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, we want to try to get more people to go to Fork Fest. So I'm glad that there's so much renewed interest. I guess it was due to some of the controversies. I mean, Pork Fest always has its controversies. People always have disagreements. There's always disagreements with the organizers and such. So maybe we will see more people going to Fork Fest next year, I hope.
I wouldn't want to be an organizer for Pork Fest. I used to organize
I wouldn't
these
either.
truck pulls and stuff, and oh man, that's a lot of work.
It's a thankless job in a lot of ways.
It is, and you do all this work, and then all of a sudden, all that work you've done doesn't count right now because somebody's said no,
or somebody's mad about something,
right,
or whatever.
Yeah. It's difficult.
Yeah, and we talked to Dennis, who was the main organizer of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, on the air on Free Talk Live, and I said, you could try to decentralize this thing even further. You could, for instance, just let the market decide on who's going to rent the pavilion, right? It doesn't have to be the Free State Project that rents the pavilion and decides on who speaks. Somebody else could do that. It could be Jeffrey Tucker's Brownstone Institute. It could be, Reason Magazine. It could be anybody that wanted to put $1,000 a day up. I think that's what Rogers charges for it, and then let the market decide what should be there.
What I'd kind of like to do for hopefully for Man Camp next year is like maybe someone could sponsor the Anvil. Somebody could sponsor the Forge. Somebody could sponsor the Hammer. And another thing, or sponsor tools, or just sponsor the tent, or sponsor the site, or whatever. And these are just some ideas that some people are giving me because I guess I'm not really good at asking for money. There's a lot of different ways to ask for money, and so that would certainly help. You have I don't know, it could be the
Porcupine Real Estate,
Porcupine, or Forge or Anvil or whatever. And
that could work.
And the other thing I wanted, so what I did do is I actually sent one family home with all the blacksmithing equipment they need. And one thing that's really cool, we used it a little bit at Pork Fest, is I have an induction heater. So you can heat metal with this electric induction heater. And it's actually, I use it at home quite a bit. So I sent a guy home, Richard Grove, actually, of Autonomy Unlimited. I sent him home with basically a vise that could also be an anvil. I sent him home with some stock. I sent, metal stock to bend up for him and his son. And I sent him home with my induction forge so he could just plug it into his wall, in his garage, and they could do this. No fire, no flame. It's 110 volt induction heating tool. If anybody wants to look that up, they're really awesome. And I sent them some tools to do it, and some protective gear. They got safety glasses, gloves, and an apron. And another thing I'd like to do next year is have basically raffle off an entire blacksmithing set. So you would get like an anvil, tongs, tools, maybe an induction forge. The induction, or no, I call it an induction forge, but the induction heating tool, and that's cheap. It's like $130, the one I have. Or maybe we'll do a propane forge. But like you could use this induction tool if you lived in a homeowners association place. You probably couldn't light a forge in your garage or out in a driveway. The neighbors might not like you tinging on an anvil, but like if the neighbors, see kids learning skills and building their confidence, and they're going to actually grow up to be, productive, people, they might like it.
Yeah, I like the raffle idea. I mean, that sounds like a cool idea.
Well, Adamo and Freeman and Pete Air, they raffled off their RV, years ago.
Yeah, they did, didn't they?
Yep. And then Silver Dave and Adamo raffled off some rifles years ago.
That's another one we were talking about, bringing Adamo back, because it's been too long since he's been up here as well. There's a lot of people that kind of made their way through New Hampshire, their path, their activism or whatever, brought them here. They kind of cut their teeth for a few years here in the activism, and then their path brought them out of New Hampshire. And it sure would be great to see some of those people again.
Yeah. We've been sort of courting Adamo, trying to incentivize him to get back here. I know Dave has been trying to Silver Dave's been trying to get him back, because Adamo's a pretty skilled guy, and a lot of people like him, and Dave really likes him. I like him.
I think he's just working an office job.
Yeah.
He's like a manager at some cubicle office or whatever. It's like, what? How did that happen?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. He's making money. Good for him.
Well, I suspect that if Dave can hire him away, then he'll come work for him.
Yeah, we'll see. He's been working on it for a
while. So yeah, I am really, I'm excited to see what might happen next year for Fork Fest, because there seems like there's a lot of interest in it. As usual, the Fork Festers are talking about, well, when should it be next year? Because Fork Fest is a completely decentralized festival. I mean, no one really gets to decide these things. There's not some organizer who says, these shall be the dates for Fork Fest, right? It doesn't come down from on high. It just sort of comes out of a community discussion. So as always, there's some people that say it should be after the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which is the way it was 3 years previous. Some people say, no, it should be before the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which is the way it originally was for a few years, and that's how it was this year.
I think with Matt and Nikki's wedding, just like my wedding, it was really nice that it was before the festival.
Yours was before, yeah, that's right.
And Fork Fest was before the festival, I believe, at my wedding also. In fact, it was. And so that's nice that there's more of that overlap, especially for Matt and Nikki's wedding, which was really cool.
Yeah, it was a nice wedding.
My kids had a great time. We had a great time, and very happy for Matt and Nikki.
Did you show up that day, or were you there a day prior to that?
We got there a day before.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So.
Yeah, I think that the half-week thing worked better for Fork Fest this year than trying to do a full week and then have people stay for another week of the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It's a little bit more of an easier ask for people to show up. Just, hey, show up the weekend before and hang out, and you don't have to buy a ticket to anything, and just enjoy people.
Definitely, the whole thing was a lot for me and my family, because we were at the campground for 12 days or 11 days, I guess, and then we went home for one day. And then we had to go, we hung out in a timeshare with my father-in-law for a couple of days at Weirs Beach. And then we had to go this last weekend down to Massachusetts for a couple of nights. So we basically had, over 2 weeks of just not being home, and just running around with kids.
A little exhausting.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Check him out over at jaynoon.com. That's his website, JAYNOONE.com. And we are out of time for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, and you can join us online between now and then. Don't forget, we do have our own social media platform. You can go to social.freetalklive.com, and you can get connected with the other Free Talk Live listeners and some of the hosts there. And you don't have the same rules and restrictions that you do on places like Twitter and Facebook and whatever this new Facebook-launched Twitter competitor is going to be. Just check ours out, social.freetalklive.com.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government